Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is
Hello, a very good afternoon to you. It's just after 1 o'clock on Monday, March the 31st. I'm David Bull in for Ian Collins. Great to have your company this afternoon. Now, coming up, Prime Minister Keir Starmer says illegal immigration to the UK makes me angry as he urged countries from around the world to work together to stop people smuggling gangs in the same way they would terrorists. Meanwhile, Britain faces a fresh two-tier justice row with ethnic minority criminal suspects being given priority by judges considering bail under new guidelines drawn up by the Ministry of Justice. And French far-right leader Marine Le Pen has been barred from running for public office for 5 years and sentenced to 4 years in jail after being found guilty in an embezzlement case. Big stories around this afternoon. If you want to have your say, please do get in touch. The number 0344 499 1000. You can text the word talk in your message to 87222. You can also message us on X as well at talkTV. Well, a very good afternoon to you. It's very strange for me to be here in the afternoons. I'm normally here at Weekend Breakfast. And I'm delighted to say I'm joined by Charlie Rowley this afternoon. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Toby. Thanks for having me.
Well, absolute pleasure. And I'm delighted it is you, actually, because we're talking about illegal immigration. Let me just tell you the latest lines that are coming out. Of course, Keir Starmer said illegal immigration to the UK makes him angry, as he's urged countries from around the world to work together to stop people smuggling gangs in the same way they would terrorists. This is the first ever organised immigration crime summit in London. Now, I find this very difficult to square. He says illegal migration is a massive driver of global insecurity. Decisive action was needed, and yet where is your decisive action, Keir Starmer? There isn't any. This year, 6,000 people have come here illegally. Since he's been Prime Minister, 25,000, I think it's probably up to about 29,000. It doesn't look like he's smashed the gangs.
No, it doesn't. And the only decisive action he took, people will remember, is getting rid of the Rwanda plan. The only deterrent, whatever you thought about Rwanda, whatever you thought about the costs, it was a deterrent. And it stopped people coming into the UK because people were going back-channeling through Ireland, you'll remember, and that's why the Irish government have got a bit of an issue. So scrapping that on day one to say, come on in, is part of the reason why you're still seeing those numbers increase and those vast amount of people getting on those dinghies and crossing the channel and breaking into the UK illegally.
But of course, from my point of view, that was entirely ideological. He scrapped it because he wanted to scrap it rather than actually, I think, being pragmatic and saying, OK, well, we're almost there. It has been ratified. Let's see what effect it has. As you said, of course, people went to Ireland and Ireland wasn't very pleased about that. But would you agree? I mean, it does seem entirely ideological what he did.
Oh, totally, yes. I mean, he wanted to distance himself from the nasty Tories, as he would put it, the previous government, that it was too costly, that it wasn't working, that it was ineffective. But what people want, and what he'll be judged on, just as the last government was, is the results. And under the last government, it was a fundamental failure under the Conservatives to stop those numbers of people coming in. They're looking at Sir Keir Starmer, they're looking at his record now, they're still seeing the numbers of people cross the channel and come into the UK, record numbers now. He is failing in a number one issue that he set out at the general election. He's failing to deliver on a number one issue that people in this country care about, and that is stopping the boats, that is smashing the gangs, call it whatever you want. It's just stopping illegal immigration into the UK and restoring British fairness.
So what do you make of this summit, the Organised Immigration Crime Summit in London? He says, oh, I've got representatives from 40 countries, Albania, Vietnam, Iraq, we've got France, the US and China. It's been called by Robert Jenrick a talking shop and nothing more.
Well, the proof in the pudding is in the eating, as somebody once
the eating
told.
thereof.
The eating thereof. And I think we'll have to wait and see. I wouldn't want to jump the gun too soon, because it's right to probably talk to countries like Vietnam, where actually you're seeing that vast majority of people from...
So what they call upstream. So,
exactly,
so dealing with it upstream as opposed to downstream.
Exactly, because so far, paying France doesn't seem to be working at all. They're not upholding their end of the bargain, as far as I can see. You know, we should be able to deport people back from France. The whole point of migration is that you settle in if you're particularly fleeing refuge, is to settle in the first country of safety, and you've passed quite a few in order to get to the shores of the UK, I can assure you. So I'm all for talking to other countries. I'm all for expanding it, but will it just be a talking shop? Will it get results? I think what Robert is probably saying, why it's just a talking shop, is because there is still no deterrent. What is the deterrent?
I don't think there is one.
The UK?
I mean, just looking back, as I said, 25,000 people have come to this country illegally since Starmer became Prime Minister. 6,600 have crossed this year alone. They have no idea how many people live in the United Kingdom illegally. They've no idea how many people have actually overstayed their visas as well. Now, Keir Starmer claims that actually the results are now coming through. They say we've been able to announce today that 24,000 people who have no right to be in the United Kingdom have now been removed. That's the highest rate for the best part of a decade. Now, Nigel Farage has lashed out and said Keir Starmer is not smashing the gangs, he's actually smashing records. Let's just remind ourselves, shall we, of Keir Starmer's best bits of smashing the gangs.
You will have helped to smash the gangs, secure our borders, and save countless lives. Smash the criminal gangs, and they are criminal gangs, that are running this vile trade and putting people in the boats. Take those gangs down. I think smashing the gangs that are taking people's money is a deterrent. I think you have to smash those gangs. The only way to stop that is to smash the gangs that are running this vile trade. Smash the gangs.
Smash, 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 smash. £22 billion hole working for working people, and so on and so on. I mean, it's entirely robotic. I mean, just when you look at the detail of all of this, and actually I'll just pause there to ask you, if I may, do you believe that Keir Starmer is smashing the gangs, or is Nigel Farage right, and actually all he's doing is smashing records in terms of the number of people coming to this country? 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. Let's just look at what he is talking about putting money upstream. This is what he says. £30 million worth of funding will be directed to tackle supply chains, illicit finances, trafficking routes across Europe, the Balkans, Asia and Africa. He also then pledges an extra £3 million to expand the CPS, the Crown Prosecution Service, capacity to prosecute smugglers and expand its international footprint. I was quite intrigued by this idea that he is essentially saying we need to work together as an international community to break this in the same way that we have broken terrorist plots. Is that a fair parallel?
That's a very good question. Look, I mean, I agree with that approach, because I think anything that can be done, and talking to more people to try and stem the flow of people crossing multiple borders to get to the UK, should be looked into, should be analysed carefully, but it should be broadly welcome, because we want to stop the fundamental problem. But what bothers me, and I think what will bother people about that analysis, is that, you know, we were part of, you might remember, the European Union.
I do remember vividly. I remember.
And I'm sure some of your viewers and listeners will too. And you remember back in, I think it was it 2014, 13, 14, you know, where swathes of people coming through Germany, because it was a German decision under Angela Merkel at the time to allow.
Absolutely.
So you can be part of whatever conversation or whatever group or international blob, European Union or otherwise, but if you haven't got the countries fundamentally agreeing with you, which is that we need to stop this and be strict about it and stop the flow of people coming from all the way from, as you say, from Vietnam upstream through to the UK, then it's not going to work.
I mean, so Yvette Cooper, there are two things. First of all, this morning she is blaming the good weather. She says it's not our fault, it's the good weather. Well, I sort of agree with that. We know that the number of crossings goes up in good weather, but you're right. So if you remove the only deterrent there was, and it did look like the threat of Rwanda, if you look back, the number of small boat crossings dropped because of the threat of the Rwanda policy. Now, that policy was dropped. Now, for a long time, other political parties have been saying this is ridiculous. The ECHR is being abused. We've seen this time and time again, like, for example, the father that was allowed to stay in this country because his son didn't like foreign chicken nuggets or whatever it was. I mean, I can give you a litany of these kind of cases. Yvette Cooper is now saying, well, maybe we need to disapply Article 8 of the ECHR. Well, it's about time, isn't it?
I think that's probably right. And I think people are always moved when they see those headlines, and you're absolutely right, there's headline after headline about people using a particular mechanism, whether it's on race, whether it's on diversity, whether it's on chicken nuggets, or whether it's I'm going to not be safe back home if I get deported back to Pakistan because, I can't drink there, or I'm an alcoholic or whatever, so therefore
or suddenly you're gay when you arrive in this country. Exactly.
All stories that appeared over the weekend, load of old nonsense. It moves people from actually thinking, look, so to begin with, my approach is always, if you're in something, stay in and reform it and make it better.
I would agree.
If you can't do that, or if it's not fit for purpose, as the EHCR currently isn't fit for purpose, then you have to maybe disapply certain things, or you leave altogether.
But surely the whole point about Brexit, and that is what you brought up, the whole point about Brexit was that we believe that we are a significant global player. We can make our own rules. Now, at the moment, we are subservient to a foreign court, and that cannot be right, can it? Because that is not Brexit.
Exactly. And it is, we've seen it with lawyers in this country, the Supreme Justice, who are sort of making decisions that don't seem to appear to be in the spirit of what the lawmakers, the politicians that we elect in this country, how they wanted things to pan out. The legal framework isn't applying that in the way, as I say, in which politicians would like it to be. So you've got to be robust. And as an independent nation, someone that has voted to leave the EU, that can still work with European allies, as the government seems to be doing, whether it gets the results, that remains to be seen. But it's not as if we've sort of just removed ourselves from the international stage. In fact, we've become bigger on the international stage because we're saying, look, it's a problem here, but we're dealing with it. We've got the capacity to deal with it because we've got also many other great things going for us. Well, we did. When it was the growing economy, whether it's our diplomatic service, whatever it was. So we can be a big player on the international stage, but it is UK law that should be supreme, not being overruled by any other judge, not being suggested that sentencing guidance should apply for a certain group of people and not others. It is fairness in this. It is fairness. That's a fundamental principle of being British. It's a fundamental principle of the United Kingdom. That's what binds us all together, is fairness. And when things aren't fair, that's when people get annoyed, and that's when you need to start looking at things like leaving the EU.
And of course, we're a sovereign democracy. It's really interesting, and we'll talk more about this, about Trump's tariffs. Of course, as a businessman, he believes the way to get his way is to increase tariffs until the countries renege or capitulate. And of course, the whole point of Brexit was that we can set our own rules. And it looks like that is what Starmer is trying to do with Trump, for example. The idea that we're still hamstrung to the European Union seems absolutely ridiculous to me. There are two other issues here, I think. First of all is the number of illegal migrants being used in the gig economy. I think that is very interesting. You only have to look at various delivery services, shall we say, where a lot of those workers aren't here legally and clearly they're being employed. Now, there is an onus of care and a duty of care from those companies to check the employment records and the visa status of those people, but not if they are self-employed. And that needs to change.
Yes, I think that's right. And I think that was something that Yvette Cooper, I think, announced over the weekend. But everybody, I'm sure, has got an example, or a real-life example, if you've had a takeaway, whether it's a delivery or anything else. And, you've
others
seen...
are available.
Others are available. and you've seen, your driver that's been allocated to you, and they turn up at the door, and they don't look anything like as they appear to be. So,
often different genders.
Often different genders, heights, weights, and all the rest of it. So, there is clearly a problem there. I mean, there is a question about whether somebody has fraudulent documents and has been able to sort of cheat the system in that way. But the onus absolutely has to be on employers. If they know that they're employing someone that shouldn't be here just to undercut wages, for example, or to exploit those particular people, then they need to pay the price as well.
Well, absolutely right. Lots and lots of messages. Hi, David. Great show. Starmer has about as much chance of stopping the smuggling gangs as he did stopping the drugs gang. None. There is too much money involved in people smuggling. Philip from Northern Ireland. When I hear Keith Stalin say he's angry, I think of Stuart Francis on Crackerjack saying, "Ooh, I could crush a grape." Do you think the public buy Starmer's rhetoric? I mean, he sat there this morning giving this kind of prime ministerial address saying he knows how frustrating this is and so on. I just don't know the public believe him.
No, because the public I think, have been taken for a ride for so long, they will feel, that they now just want results. And you can preach on the one hand by saying, look, how many thousands of people we've actually deported, that's one thing. But how many more people are coming into the country? How many more people have got to be processed? How many people are still in hotels in this country, costing the UK taxpayer £6-8 million a day, I think it is now.
Well, they say it's going to carry on till 2029.
And it's going to carry on. And the public can see through. When you have another government Minister, for example, whether it's Angela Rayner or anyone else, to say we're going to build more homes in this country. At the same time, you discover in the Home Office that they're saying, well, actually, those homes and hotel rooms will still be allocated to migrants that come into this country. You think, well, hold on, you can put 2 and 2 together, get 4 in this country, and realise that actually all of those houses that you're building, all of those public services you're investing in, it's going to people that are coming into the country.
Well, let's just look at the facts. So our asylum bill, 5.38 billion, 1.2 million immigrants living on benefits, 1.2 million living on benefits in the UK, receiving 7.5 billion in universal credit. The cost of providing them with public services, 3.5 billion. We spent 27 million on interpreters for benefit claimants who can't speak English. Then 10% of referral letters sent out by NHS England had to be translated into a foreign language because they didn't actually bother to learn English. And translation services for the police have climbed to £19 million a year. We're idiots.
It's ridiculous. Exactly. And that's why the British public feel they've been taken for a ride. And it's not about attacking necessarily those people. It's not about attacking people. It's making sure that money that is available in this country is going to people that need it the most. And that's hard-working people in this country, British people that have come here, or people that have, migrated here, but are working and paying a fair wage and paying their taxes. But the benefit system is there for people that need to rely. And the more money that is spent and wasted on public services that isn't going to people that need it the most, that's the crime in all of this. It's people that are losing out on benefits that they should receive, but they can't because the money is being spent on hotel accommodation or interpretation or whatever it is, or policing.
But also, what about British nationals who need a house? And of course, you've got mass immigration coming in. Actually, there's another story, and I have to go to a break. There's another story, though, that migrants have overstayed their visas account for nearly 40% of all asylum claimants. So people are coming here on a visa, whether it's a work visa, a student visa, and they're simply staying. Why? Why are we not deporting them?
Yeah, well, it was John Reid, I can't remember what year it was now, 2002 maybe, or a bit later, he said, the Home Office is not fit for purpose. And that still remains the case, because the Home Office haven't got a handle on the migration system or the visa system or whatever it is. They don't know the numbers of people in the country. That's why you need, I think, a bit of drastic action to get on top of that, and then you can start policing your borders properly.
Quite right. Charlie, thanks for the moment. After the break, we're going to be talking about two-tier justice in this country. Also, the latest news about Marine Le Pen. I said to Julia, I thought it was rather convenient that she's suddenly out of the picture for the next 5 years, given that the right of centre party seem to be doing very well across Europe. We're also going to be talking about some of the other stories making the news this morning. Apparently, it is offensive, according to B&Q, to say blind drunk. We'll find out why after this break.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. David Bull in for Ian Collins. I'm joined this afternoon by Charlie Rowley. Let's talk about this article by Lord Sewell, which is in The Telegraph. He's claimed that Guardian editors helped to create the conditions for the Southport riots. Now, as you remember, of course, this was absolutely horrific, those terrible murders. But it's really what he's talking about after what happened was the sort of lack of information, the conspiracy theories that were allowed to prosper, being told repeatedly this was nothing to do with terrorism. And he goes further to say that actually, if you remember rightly, he previously led an inquiry into racial disparities in Britain. He said the liberal elite has ignored the plight of the white working classes for too long. He says it's inconvenient for publications like The Guardian to cover struggling white communities. They want to promote ideas of racial victimhood. I've talked a great deal about this, which is that you've got this mindset of the liberal elite in Islington who think the world is a wonderful place, and they talk and espouse the values and virtues of multiculturalism, which is all very well, but you have to have integration. And for far too long, we've ignored white working class boys.
I think that's absolutely right. And the priority has always been about, as you say, this left-wing ideology that's been about, increasing diversity and equality, which is all fair,
yes.
But it's equality for just different groups of people and not, it turns out to be white working class boys who always seem to be left behind, who appear to be bottom of the league tables when it comes to English and maths in particular. And so the idea that it's all, as you say, we can be, diverse and equal and in perfect harmony in this multicultural rainbow of love, and hold hands, kumbaya, day in, day out. But you're leaving people, in particular, white young boys behind, and that has provoked things like the Southport riots. Of course, there were people there that were there just out to sort of riot and cause mayhem.
Of course, but I do believe they were a minority of that group. I think there was enormous frustration, a sense of mistrust, and not being told the truth.
Yes. And when you're constantly told and when you're constantly seeing in your own communities outside of London, and as the days go on, David, I mean, most people will understand that London is not representative of the United Kingdom, and neither is X and social media.
But even in London, right, people need to integrate. You cannot have silos of people who do not subscribe to British values, not speaking English as a primary language. That cannot be allowed to continue. And I think someone from a political party needs to grasp this, actually, because otherwise you're driving division and fear and hatred, and that will end badly.
And that's the point, because if we're unable to, and for too long it's felt as though people have been unable to speak up about those things, to say, actually, if you're in the United Kingdom, I'd much rather have, signposts and shop signs to be written in English rather than, other languages, perhaps.
Well, I would agree.
I think most people will say that that's just plain old common sense. But if you can't challenge that or have a conversation about it, at least openly, then you're branded racist or whatever else. And therefore, but it doesn't expel the conversation. It drives it into darker territories, the dark web or certain groups, and that's when you start to see frustrations and people responding in a way which is rather unpleasant.
Just very quickly, because time is tight, I could talk to you all day, actually. But let's just talk about Marine Le Pen being barred. So Marine Le Pen will not be able to stand at France's next presidential election, banned from politics for 5 years. She was given a 4-year prison sentence, 2 years suspended, a €100,000 fine. The judge said Le Pen was at the heart of a scheme to embezzle EU funds to pay party staff. Look, I don't know the details of all of this. What I do know is that EU is not even able to sign off its own accounts.
Yes. Yes, and I did spend some time in the European Parliament, and
As did I.
Well, yes. And I think what's my understanding is that obviously you are paid. There are different obviously political groups within the European Parliament, but you are ultimately employed by the European Parliament. I think that's where you're.
Yes.
So it's the discrepancy over what jobs you're actually doing, because you're paid by the Parliament or through the Parliament, even though you might be assigned to a political.
Well, you get a salary, and you also get paid a per diem allowance for the number of days that you turn up. So you turn up, you can sign in, and then disappear off and you still get your money.
Oh, well, I missed that one. I'll have to go back. If they haven't signed off the accounts, I might still be quids.
Well, I don't get a pension. We weren't there long enough for me to get a pension, but there we are.
Well, never mind.
So is it convenient? Marine Le Pen, thorn in the side, I would have said, because, of course, she was doing very well, the National Rally, doing extremely well. As I said, you're seeing the rise of these right-of-centre parties. And I think this is propelled, and we'll go back right to the beginning, shall we? It's propelled by uncontrolled mass immigration all over Europe.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And, you know, this could be a sort of a Donald Trump situation where he was obviously, the courts were chasing after him time and time again when he was going for the Republican nomination. It only emboldened him and his supporters. So if she appeals, there might be some legal leeway there where she's sort of allowed to stand during an appeals process before the courts actually determine what needs to happen. But we'll have to wait and see. But I think you're right. The rise of the right and centre-right thinking is because, for too long, the real British public and publics across Europe and the rest of the world have been ignored by politicians in a metropolitan blob.
Also, just talking about the metropolitan blob, because, of course, it seems that we're living in an increasingly woke environment. This is the latest from B&Q. They've told their staff you cannot use the phrase blind drunk. You can't say you're deaf to our pleas. They've issued guidance against using these kind of phrases or anything that associates impairments with negative things. Actually, as a medic, I would say that the reason it is called blind drunk is because alcohol is toxic to nerves and destroys the optic nerve and therefore can render you blind. So therefore, it's probably pretty accurate.
Well, and I will take your word over that of anyone.
But do you not think we're getting ridiculous that you can't say things that are in common parlance?
Totally, totally. It's language that we all understand. There's nothing offensive by saying. I don't think blind drunk or fallen on deaf ears or whatever. So, it is just words and language and lingo that we all use and know. And I think there was one line in that article which actually did tickle me because I think it's the B&Q handbook that they've issued to all staff.
I must read.
A must read, a bedtime reading, I'd suggest, if you want to get off early. But I think somebody compared it to, these kind of nurturing manuals should be left to just parents and gardeners to sort of nurture.
And so true. There's another one, actually, as well, doing the rounds this morning. The London Museum has urged staff to address the problem of whiteness. What is that? Apparently, they've been requested, the employees, to tackle concepts such as hierarchical working. They talk about whiteness as defined by ideas, ways of working and normative values. This is word salad that can support directly or indirectly the continuation of racial inequalities and a lack of racial diversity in institutions. We need to have a tool for culture change. We need equity, diversity and inclusion strategy. They talk about we need to change our culture, our way of working to support, essentially to stamp out institutional forms of racism. This has to stop.
Yes. Well,
doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Well, I'll add that reading along with the B&Q manual there.
You're going to have a busy evening.
I'm going to get a good night's sleep tonight, I think, reading both of those things. But you're right. For too long we're talking ourselves down. We're being told that we were responsible for X, Y, Z. That we've got to pay massive reparations to countries and issues that were long in the past. That as someone that is white, somebody once, I should understand my white privilege. And I think, well, hold on. I was born in 1990, April the 18th, so young. Birthday next month.
Happy birthday.
Cards are welcome.
Cards and gifts.
Cards and gifts. Please donate. Give generously.
Yeah.
But I just think,
Do you have white privilege?
No, of course I don't. Because, I think, like everybody else, you go to school, you grow up, you work hard, you do the right thing, you earn, you get a good job, you play by the rules, you don't commit crime. You just, how your parents sort of shape you, I think, is fundamental to how you end up sort of being. So it's hopefully a credit to them. Others might disagree. We'll see what they say.
I think many would disagree, to be quite honest. Lots of messages coming in about you, Charlie, actually. Lots of people saying you need to stand for Parliament, and I would agree with that, actually. You speak sense, well, most of the time. Hi, David and Charlie. This is Nick and Kent. Good afternoon to you. So good to see you both in this spot. Until we stop advertising on the government's own website what benefits illegal migrants will get, stop the judges from allowing lawbreakers to stay and rubber stamp asylum applications just to get the numbers down who are waiting so they can say they are dealing with them, and actually bother to send them back, those that shouldn't be here, the situation will not get better. The government is allowing the very fabric of our societies to change, and not for the better. This government just does not have the will. After all, they're importing votes at the next election. Do you think that's true? Does the government actually want to stop illegal immigration?
I do. I do think that. But I just don't think they're going about it in the right way. I don't think it's being taken...
Do you think they know what to do?
I don't think they know what to do. I don't think they're taking it seriously enough, and that's testament by scrapping, as I say, a deterrent. Whatever you thought about it, it was a deterrent. It hadn't got off the ground. You know, no pun intended, me being a romantic scheme, but, you know...
300 million or whatever, yeah?
Yes, yeah, but I think people are...
3 Home Secretaries, was it? Yeah.
Maybe more.
100 million Home Secretary.
Maybe more.
Maybe more, actually, yeah.
Block
Good
that.
value for money, that.
Yeah, and, you know, of course, that was the political failures within the last government, but the actual trying to do something about it, until you saw that scheme, which we'll never know. I mean...
We will never know. But you see, I just don't understand. When you come into power, why wouldn't you have let that play out? Because if it didn't work, that's a win for you to say it didn't work and therefore we're scrapping it. If it did work, you say, right, we as a new administration will build on that and we will then put money upstream. It wasn't thought through.
Exactly, and you can't have your cake and eat it. To coin another phrase that might upset the obesity brigade, but you know, you can't say, oh, we're going to blame the last government on the terrible 22 billion black hole that they've left us, terrible public finances, terrible public services, but we're going to scrap other things. They could have just let the whole thing run and said, yes, okay, well, we'll stick with Rwanda, and if it is proved not to have worked in the way in which people would have hoped, then of course you can say, well, we let it run because the last government invested so much money in it. It clearly didn't work. That's why we're bidding it. But you don't do it before the things even got off the ground.
What they need is a good special advisor, Charlie. Charlie, it's been such a pleasure. I just have to leave you with one message from Kenny in Edinburgh. Hi, David. Charlie Rowley should run for election in Edinburgh. He would do very well. He is clear in what he says. He doesn't use word salads. He's honest. I don't always agree with everything he says, but that's okay. I will always vote for a person I feel is sincere rather than someone who says what people just want to hear.
Well, that's
Edinburgh is for you.
Well, and I'm a big fan of Edinburgh, actually.
So
I love it very much. And I'm a big fan of Scottish people who do speak sense and actually do speak very clearly and know what they're talking about. So I'll come up. I'll come and visit you. I'll come to Edinburgh.
Fantastic. Charlie, thanks ever so much for your company.
Thank you. Thanks
this afternoon. After the break, we're going to be talking more about immigration. I'm going to be talking to Dr. Mike Jones, who's a political scientist and a migration expert. Also, your calls, please. Your thoughts on all of the above. Is this just a talking shop for Keir Starmer? Let me know your thoughts, please. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
1:37 Monday, March the 31st. I'm David Bull, in for Ian Collins. Really nice to see you this afternoon. Let's talk about immigration, shall we? Because Keir Starmer says illegal immigration to the UK makes him very angry. By the way, 6,000 this year illegal migrants have come here, and 25,000 probably more since he became Prime Minister. So it will make him angry, won't it? It makes the rest of the country very angry. He urged countries from around the world to work together to stop people smuggling gangs in the same way that they would terrorists. He is talking at the first ever organised immigration crime summit in London. He said illegal migration is a massive driver of global insecurity. Decisive action is needed to address it. When he was addressing that convention, he made it clear that he wants to see action and that he is deeply angry. Let's take a look at what he said earlier today.
Illegal migration is a massive driver of global insecurity. It undermines our ability to control who comes here. And that makes people angry. It makes me angry, frankly, because it's unfair on ordinary working people who pay the price, from the cost of hotels to our public services struggling under the strain. And it's unfair on the illegal migrants themselves, because these are vulnerable people being ruthlessly exploited by vile gangs. We've got to bring to bear all the powers we have at our disposal in much the same way that we do against terrorism.
Well, joining me now is Dr. Mike Jones, political scientist and migration expert. Good afternoon.
Great to be here.
Really good to talk to you this afternoon. This seems extraordinary to me that Keir Starmer says it makes him angry. I don't see anything decisive from this government to stem illegal migration. He talks there about people who are coming across to this country, that they're being exploited. Of course, he seems to have neglected those people who are economic migrants, jumping on a boat, chucking their passport in the sea, and no one seems to be doing anything about it.
Yeah, precisely. I mean, illegal immigrants, as you say, they destroy their documents, they cross through safe countries, they mingle with organised gangs, they exchange money, and they come here and they exploit the hospitality of the British taxpayer. They're not invited. So, you know, this works both ways. And ultimately, the summit isn't going to make any difference. It's an exercise in optics, nothing more, nothing less. A bit of window dressing to mask the rot, while the foundations remain untouched.
Why is he doing this? Is it to try and get some sort of political advantage, to say, look, I'm convening all of these countries. We've seen all of these countries, including France, the US and China, coming to London to discuss the problem of immigration. We are a sovereign democracy. If we wanted to control our borders, we could do it.
Yeah, precisely. I mean, it's a sort of smoke and mirrors exercise. They want to shift the focus onto the international arena, but most of the problems are domestic. They're rooted in our legal system. The reason why this crisis is taking place is because we do not have the legal tools to detain people for a very short period of time and then deport them. And obviously, you've got to address the domestic legal architecture before you focus on the sort of more panoramic global picture.
So just looking at the numbers, we've got 38,000 still housed in hotels. That's according to the latest figures. 42,000 outstanding immigration appeals. We've got immigrants staying longer in Britain than before. As I said, 25,000 people came to the country illegally since Keir Starmer came to power. There has been a shift, though, hasn't there, in Labour's rhetoric. They've realised that actually this is a huge problem for them electorally as we go into various elections, and of course the general election in 4 years' time. He knows he has to get illegal immigration under control, because I still believe that apart from the cost of living, it's pretty much up there in terms of the way that people will vote.
Yeah, I mean, it's what they call a balance issue. So it's one of the most important, the most salient to the British public. And yeah, I mean, the rhetoric is robust. Starmer talks about this angering him. Yvette Cooper says, you know, governments, not gangmasters, should be in charge of immigration policy. I mean, who could disagree with that? But the problem is, robust rhetoric needs to be backed up with robust action. And on the latter, the Labour Party is doing very little. I mean, Sir Keir Starmer has talked about an arsenal of tools at his disposal to smash the gangs. But, you know, what are those tools? I mean, he's He's introducing counter-terror laws, strengthening serious crime prevention orders, sharing intelligence and data, and so on. And yeah, I mean, that will make a difference at the margins. But at the end of the day, if you want to smash the gangs, rather than trying to dismantle their networks, their supply chains, which is very difficult, you need to punish their clients. You need to punish the illegal immigrants. And how do you do that? Well, you need to detain and deport, because whatever money that's exchanged hands will be a sunk cost. And they'll stop paying the gangs. That's how you tackle the illegal migration crisis, rather than, you know, trying to zap these various units, which is very, very difficult.
I mean, I was talking to Charlie Rowley about this, saying that what he is trying to do, he believes that money is the answer to all of this. We've seen 500 million or thereabouts going to France. He's talking about 30 million of funding going to Europe, the Balkans, Asia and Africa. I welcome the 3 million that goes to the CPS to broaden its capacity as well. But they're also talking about £1 million going towards strengthening efforts to root out people smuggling kingpins in Iraq's Kurdistan region. They're just chucking their money away, aren't they?
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, money does play a role in this, but that's when you're actually trying to deport people. You could use, for example, international aid as leverage if, you know, a country was unwilling to take these people back, or you could, you know, threaten to tax remittances. But, you know, I think this is an awful waste of money. I mean, you mentioned France. You know, we pay France, and to be fair, they do what's been promised. They confiscate boat parts on the beaches. They're constantly patrolling Calais for gang operations. And yeah, France have stopped people from making the journey. But has it solved the problem? No, it hasn't, because they try and try again. Ultimately, you need that deterrence effect. So it's domestic policy, rather than, you know, chucking money to various governments and transnational organisations.
So I mentioned this earlier, but there is definitely a change in tone from Yvette Cooper. She's talking about disapplying Article 8 of the ECHR, the right to family life. We know that this has been used repeatedly by, for example, the Albanian migrant not deported because his son didn't like particular nuggets. Pakistani paedophile father not deported. A woman granted asylum after joining a proscribed terrorist group. A Zimbabwean paedophile allowed to stay in the UK, all citing their right to a family life. This Zimbabwean paedophile says he's gay, jailed more than 5 years for child sex offences, autistic and deaf, and yet he's allowed to stay in this country. Surely the response to this has to be, as a sovereign democratic country, either we leave the European Court of Human Rights, or we ignore the rulings from the European Court of Human Rights, because they are only advisory.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is that the European Convention of Human Rights is part of British law. The European Court of Human Rights makes very few interventions. It's our domestic courts applying this international treaty to cases, and doing so in a more zealous fashion than their counterparts in Strasbourg. You know, I think Yvette Cooper is right to talk about Article 8, but really you need to tackle Article 3. Which prevents us from actually deporting people to allegedly unsafe countries.
But is the answer then to leave the ECHR?
Well, you've got to abolish the Human Rights Act. That's how you leave the ECHR.
So we abolish that, and we have a British Bill of Rights. We enshrine it in British law as a sovereign democratic country.
You wouldn't necessarily need the British Bill of Rights. You could just return to the pre-1998 constitutional settlement before the Human Rights Act was introduced. Arguably, we were a more libertarian society before the Human Rights Act was introduced. Most of our liberties are enshrined in common and statute law. So, yeah, I mean, either abolish the Human Rights Act, amend it, or disapply it to immigration policy, and then you can begin the process of leaving the Council of Europe, which makes us party to the European Court of Human Rights. But the number one priority is the Human Rights Act. That is the root cause of the illegal migration crisis.
So if you were to advise the Prime Minister, what would you say to him today?
Well, obviously, I'd say you need to get rid of the Human Rights Act, but I'm a realist. I don't think the Labour Party emotionally or ideologically would go down that route.
Even if they see their poll ratings sliding, which we are already seeing?
Yeah, I think the best you can hope for is either for Labour to amend the Human Rights Act or to disapply Articles 3 and 8 to immigration policy. I think that's a more realistic option for Labour. Obviously, Reform UK, Conservatives, very different conversation. I think they'd be more open to actually scrapping the Human Rights Act altogether.
Really good to talk to you. Thank you very much for your time. That's Dr. Mike Jones, their political scientist and migration expert. Your thoughts, please, this afternoon. Keir Starmer says he's going to smash the gangs. We heard repeatedly, I'm smashing the gangs. Or is he, as Nigel Farage says, just smashing records by the record number of people coming into this country? What's the answer? What are your thoughts this afternoon? 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk and your message to 87222. So many messages coming in. Surely Starmer, this is Shelley, good afternoon to you. Surely Starmer, being an international lawyer and Prime Minister, has all the experience and tools to do this if he actually wants to. He just doesn't want to. Thanks, Shelley, for that. This is Joanna in Salisbury, one of our regulars. Good afternoon to you. He's allowing everything to get out of control, overrun with illegal and legal migrants, taking us as close as possible to the EU with this new inescapable net zero document he is just going to sign. He's got his chequebook out whilst handing money away hand over fist whilst the UK is falling apart. He is taxing us until we squeak. He's trying to make us beg to return to the EU by destroying us. Your thoughts on all of that, please. We'll take a break. After the break, your calls, your thoughts, your messages. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Wow, you're on fire this afternoon. Good afternoon, David, says Maggie. Good afternoon, Maggie. So Starmer talking tough, trying to act like a world leader on smashing the people smugglers. Now, where have we heard it repeatedly by him? He sounds as tough as a bag of marshmallows I have in my cupboard. Maggie, thanks for that. Let's take a call now from Joe in Hull on the migration crisis. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, how are you?
Yeah, good, thanks very much indeed. Look, Starmer's getting tough now. He's going to smash the gangs. He's convening this big convention, 2 days, all these countries coming together. He's going to stick loads more money upstream. He thinks that's the solution.
Well, he would do. He's not really wanting to address the head of the snake, really, and the head of the snake is the freebies and the incentives to get here for coming here. If you stop that, then there's no incentive to come. On another note, he's blaming these gangs, and I don't think these gangs are solely to blame. I think the people themselves that are taking these risks are to blame as well. Because if I was to go to France and want to be in England, I would go by the proper avenues. I would get my passport, I would get on a cheap Ryanair flight, other flights aren't available, and I would then enter England that way.
Well, you would, but what happens if you're in France illegally anyway? You're not going to do that, are you?
But the question is, why are they there illegally? Why are they not just getting an aeroplane over to England?
Well, they would argue that for those people who are truly fleeing war-torn countries, that's one thing, but there's no doubt that a huge swathe are economic migrants looking for a better life.
Well, that's all well and fine, but they're fleeing from these wars that I've never even heard of. We never hear what they actually are fleeing from. We just hear that they come here with no credentials whatsoever. And my point is, if I had nothing to add, I would be coming on an aeroplane with my passport. I wouldn't be paying thousands to criminals to organise transport over the channel.
Sure.
I would be paying £40 or £50 for a flight.
So Joe, what's the answer?
Well, the answer is stop the freebies, stop the hotels, stop the incentive of wanting them to come here for the free stuff. It's not difficult. Just stop that, and within 6 months they won't come.
Well, of course, the government says that the hotels will continue until 2029 at the earliest.
Well, that's because they've got no real plan of how to, get them out of the country. They're here now, and they're here because of what they receive when they get here. If we put a draw line in it and stop the benefits, stop the hotels, stop the free clothes, stop the free health care, they've got no reason to come here.
Joe, really strong points, well made. Thank you for your call this afternoon. We've had a voice note as well from Kelvin, also about immigration.
I mean, if you really want to smash the gangs and stop the gangs, why not just send boats over there to pick up the illegals anyway? And then you can bring them halfway across and then turn around and take them back. That'll stop the gangs, won't it? Just an easy way. Or, if all the countries stick together and ignore the ECHR, because let's face it, what can they do if everybody ignores them? Nothing. They're not going to go to war with anybody. And all the countries that are suffering with the migrants, all of them, just send them all back. Stop them from coming through and just send them back. ECHR can't do jack, honestly.
Turn the boats back. Georgina is in London, who also wants to talk about immigration. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon. If ever there was a competition for best dressed man, you would win.
I love you. Thank you very much.
Right. Listen, something that no one said, and I'm going to say it. These immigrants that are coming over are not only fighting age, David, they are voting age. Now, Keir Starmer, this is all lip service at the moment with him because there's upcoming elections in May. I can't say anything about it,
no,
but
you
that's
can't.
What this is about. All Keir Starmer is going to do is smash the legal requirement of showing identification for the next election. This has been done before in the USA. There's nothing stopping him doing it in the UK. This means by 2028, the Labour Party will have 4 million plus voting age sure votes. This is why there's no rush for them to stop these boats. It's corruption on a biblical level. It's not rocket science to stop illegal immigration, David. All you've got to do is stop incentive, stop spending our money over to France, and reinforce our borders with the money that you would be keeping in your pocket. Stop the ECHR, have a British Bill of Rights so we can then have jurisdiction on who stays, who goes. Nigel Farage has got the right idea. He said anyone in the back of a lorry or coming over a boat is deported, no exceptions. This government is making laws to suit their own needs, and it's totally unacceptable. We're not now living in a democracy, sweetheart. It's more like a dictatorship. We are indirectly told what to say, what to use as fuel, what to think, and what to drive. We have had enough.
A beautiful point, well made, Georgina. Really good to talk to you this afternoon. David, this is Dave in South Gloucestershire. Let's be honest, Starmer scrapped Rwanda in a fit of childish peevishness, and also he was scared it would work. As if he did, it wouldn't have appeared to scrap it without appearing less sensible. It's ideological childishness. That's the word I used, actually, ideology. Yes, this latest massive meeting, no doubt costing us a small fortune to host it, is another example of what we've seen from Labour. It's more talk, no action, sound bites and slogans. It's all empty and it is all useless. David, why do we keep having the same migrant conversation? The conversation we should be having is why there is no will throughout Europe to stop it. Well, that's not entirely true, actually. Of course, you saw Giorgia Meloni desperate to stop it because they've got major problems in her country. Why? What's the real agenda? That's Jason in Whitby. Keep all of these messages coming in, please. This is quite interesting. Michelle in Bristol. Hi, David. Nice to have you back. My local community centre have been wishing everyone a happy Eid. No problem with that, but I find it interesting and disappointing. They haven't mentioned Lent at all this year. Seems it's not just the Prime Minister. And, of course, the Prime Minister, as far as I'm aware, didn't even mention Mother's Day. I was watching to see if he actually sent out a Happy Mother's Day message. I don't think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think he actually did send out a Happy Mother's Day message. Keep all of these messages coming in. Sharon, good afternoon to you. Sharon in Wigan. Good afternoon, David. Did you just say the EU is run just like the House of Lords? You just turn up, pocket the money? Yep. Pretty much. So the way it works, you got a salary, and then when you sign in, you then get paid, I think it was 300 euros a day. That is meant to be your subsistence, so that is then used for hotels, which are expensive in Brussels or Strasbourg. And then if you get a cheap one, you keep the money. Nice game, right? Keep all of these messages coming in. David, this is Paul in Devon. Keir Starmer has got about as much chance of stopping the gangs as he has saying it correctly. Smuggling guns. What a plank. That's Paul in Devon. And this one, I've had enough bull in my lifetime, but this Labour lot are the worst. So I'm asking, is Keir Starmer actually smashing the gangs, or is he, as Nigel Farage says, just smashing records in terms of the record number of people coming here to this country illegally? Keep all of your thoughts and messages coming in, please. After the break, I'm going to be talking to Mike Indian, political journalist and commentator. I'll be taking you through all the latest political stories. We'll talk about immigration, we'll talk about the rise in council tax, and we'll talk about the rise in your household bills.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, good afternoon. Just after 2 o'clock on Monday, March the 31st, I'm David Bull in for Ian Collins. Coming up this hour, Prime Minister Keir Starmer says illegal immigration to the UK makes me angry as he urged countries from around the world to work together to stop people smuggling gangs in the same way they would terrorists. Meanwhile, families will have to tighten their purse strings from tomorrow. Energy, water, council tax, telecom bills all rise sharply above inflation. And disgraced ex-Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, who resigned in November over criticism of his handling of abuse allegations, says he forgives Church of England paedophile John Smythe, who assaulted 130 boys and young men. Your thoughts on all of the above, please. Let me know your thoughts this afternoon. You can call us on 0344 499 1000. You can leave a voice message as well. You can text 87222, text the word talk, and your message to 87222. You can also tweet us at talkTV. Well, a very good afternoon to you. We've been talking about this in the last hour. Keir Starmer is pledging to lead a global crackdown on illegal immigration. This world first, this summit, which is being billed as 40 countries in London, the Prime Minister is urging the likes of Vietnam, Iraq and France to unite behind a new approach to smash smuggling gangs with greater intelligence sharing amid record levels of illegal immigration. Now, as I said, he says it makes him very angry. Well, Yvette Cooper also spoke at the Organised Immigration Crime Summit in London, saying international cooperation is the key to stopping illegal immigration.
But we know that strengthening our border security means working with all the countries on the other sides of our borders, not just standing on our shoreline shouting at the sea. We know too that no country can do this alone, and that is why the partnerships and everyone gathering here is so important. So today we will talk about what to do to tackle this vile trade in human beings.
Well, joining me now is Mike Indian, political journalist and commentator. Yvette Cooper there saying we'll talk about what we need to do. It's because they haven't got a clue what to do, isn't it?
I think they have a very good idea that you cannot simply rely on a gimmick scheme like Rwanda, David, in order to deal with...
Come on, Mike. It never even saw the light of day, did it? So we don't even know whether it would have worked, and they scrapped it because it was ideological. We know that
every assessment, every costing, every independent expert says the Rwanda scheme would not have acted as
Experts are often wrong, Mike.
I don't think so in this case, and I think this is really Labour lining itself up for what to be judged by in 2028, 2029, David. It's already said it wants to get NHS waiting lists down. It now wants to tackle illegal migration as well. Now, you and I both know that those record migration figures that we've seen in the last few years, those are mostly driven by perfectly legal migration, not by criminal gangs as well. So the government is focusing on a bit that it wants to address. But if it's trying to, if people are going to assume this is going to bring down a radical decrease in the figures, I think they're very much mistaken.
I mean, it's a really good point, actually, in terms of what you're separating legal migration. And, of course, we saw that massive influx of 750,000 people compared with illegal migration. But I think, you know, it's one thing when the government decides that you're going to accept certain quotas for legal migration. What makes people really angry, and it's that kind of sense of British fair play, which is coming across on a small boat, being looked after by the British state, being given 3 hot meals a day, having everything provided for you, is simply unfair when families are struggling.
What we're seeing here is the attempt by the Prime Minister to put meat on the bones of what he was saying in the election campaign. So I'm welcoming this development, but ultimately, whether or not there's a new unit inside the Crown Prosecution Service or not is not going to act as a deterrent. What needs to be effective is a joined-up approach from our justice system, from our immigration system, and of course border security being part of that as well. And at the moment, we're seeing the government putting more money into defence. Now, I would also argue that if they need to seriously consider not cutting areas like, border security in the Home Office as well, we cannot simply be shoring up our defences against foreign nations at the same time as we're not looking at how we police our own borders and how we also police the streets of this country.
And of course, he believes that the answer is money, giving money away to other countries. I mean, look, it may be part of the solution, but ultimately there needs to be some sort of deterrent. He also knows, by the way, Mike, that this is a huge problem for him electorally. He has time to get on top of it, but he knows he has to sort this, and quickly.
He does, and I think, look, those figures, ever since David Cameron made that pledge, back in 2010 to keep migration down to the tens of thousands, this is hung around like a millstone around the neck of all of his successors. But, Rishi Sunak made illegal migration a key aspect of the large part of the last election. So did Keir Starmer, saying it was a matter of breaking the criminal gangs. Now, for a man who's operated in international human rights law, who's operated in Northern Ireland working with the police, you'd think he could bring his expertise on criminal gangs to bear. This is going to be the litmus test, David. If those figures of people doing the small boats crossings or choosing to enter the country, that small proportion of people that do out of net migration figures enter illegally has fallen, then he will have delivered. But that is a separate question as to whether the public expect a big drop in overall net migration figures, which, as we said, the majority of people that come here are economic migrants, they're students, they're coming here to study or work.
And of course, there's another big story, isn't there? The fact that many of them are overstaying their visas, whether they're student visas or work visas, they're simply disappearing. No one knows where they are or how many there are. I do want to move on and talk about the rise in household bills because, of course, we have heard a great deal about the cost of living crisis. Tomorrow, the families are going to be hit by a quadruple whammy of inflation-busting increases to household bills. Energy, water, council tax, telecom bills, all rising tomorrow, going up more than the CPI. That's the Consumer Prices Index measure of inflation. Water bills going up by nearly 10 times the rate. There are lots of things in here I simply do not understand, and maybe you can explain this. If the government, which it is obsessed with net zero and is trying to drive people into electric cars, why are they then making people who drive electric cars pay vehicle excise duty, an increment in vehicle excise duty, and then paying an expensive car tax? That doesn't make any sense.
Well, you mentioned water bills there, and that's going to be by far and away the biggest increase that people see. And of course, what Labour has committed to doing, again, something else I think they will be judged by, their sort of key measure of fairness is how they tackle the broken monopoly that has been the privatised water industry. Now, we know that nationalisation is not something that Keir Starmer wants to pursue, but more robust regulation and ensuring that bills go. So our Thames water customer, we've seen a sort of 40% bill increase in there, as I'm sure people have seen similar. Two, this goes back to the fact that many utility providers like energy, water do not provide genuinely competitive rates for people. Too long we relied on cheap wholesale prices in order for people to get better deals for bills. That isn't the case now. It's not hard to imagine there being some sort of price cap in the water industry as well, as there is in energy. But that would simply be a sticking plaster solution. Underpinning all of this is the nightmare possibility that inflation, as forecast by the OBR, will rise more quickly due to Donald Trump's trade war, eliminating that fiscal room, but also putting more pressure on households in this country as well.
So isn't, just in terms of the cost of living, we're also going to see an increase in the energy price cap. You talk about a price cap there. It will rise by 6.4%. We already pay the highest energy prices in the West, and this is due to the government's obsession with net zero. Isn't it time they scrapped net zero and allowed cheap production of energy?
I don't think so, David, because I think one of the issues we actually had was the fact that we were so reliant on oil and gas imported from abroad. And we must remember that it's becoming increasingly difficult to extract aspects from the North Sea. Yes, we do have a degree of energy security, but one of the things I think that's genuinely radical about this government is what Ed Miliband is proposing to do, marrying energy security with green energy. Now, we know in this country we're not short of wind, tidal or solar energy as well. Now, these won't be wholesale solutions in themselves, but if we can build up our capacity in this country as well, that will in turn, I think, bring bills down. And one of the government's cleverest decisions, I think, has been the fact that they have been promoting the unglamorous thing of energy infrastructure, pylons, for example, saying that people that live near them would actually benefit from a discount on their bills as well, giving people a cost of living incentive. That in turn ties back to electric cars, as you mentioned. If we're going to have a wholesale switch to electricity, fair enough talking about how the electricity is generated. We also need to talk about how people are going to be able to fuel up their cars, the capacity, the storage, will the network be able to stand it? So hopefully, if their commitment to be a clean energy superpower by 2030 is even partially met, our energy bills may come down.
But Mike, they keep promising we will see cheaper electricity bills as a result of the move to net zero. The total cost, 300 billion quid, 3 trillion a year, the cost of net zero. In fact, if you scrapped it, it would save 20 billion a year for the next 25 years. And of course, all we're seeing is an increase in costs for people. Let's also move now and talk about council tax. When you look at a number of upper tier authorities that will increase their council tax, 88% will impose a 4.99% increase in April. That's the most allowed without triggering a referendum. Bradford, which is Labour-run, wants a 14.99% rise, as does Conservative-run Hampshire. And then Windsor and Maidenhead, this has to be the icing on the cake. Lib Dem-run, they want 25% rise, and yet we're not seeing the services. Look at what is happening in Birmingham, for example, where I was on Friday. Rubbish piled all over the streets. Vermin, rats, everything. It is not acceptable for people paying council tax, exorbitant amounts of council tax, not to receive the services they're paying for.
Absolutely, and this is borders, I think, on one of the great issues about local government in this country, is the fact that for most of its time, funding for councils has, whatever level, has come largely from the central state. Now, that has started to change recently, but of course, council tax is a vastly unfair levy. It cannot hope to raise the same level of resource per area as well. It's the same reason behind why suggesting that councils become more dependent on rates income is not viable as well, because councils like Westminster would, in theory, be better off than other councils, say, in the northeast of England that have, say, more vacant shop space on their high street. What I am concerned about, and this goes back to what the Chancellor was saying last week, is that this sort of targeted penny pinching, which is not austerity, but is a kind of slight, aesthetic tightening of the belt, if you will, to try and show serious fiscal credibility, is just going to lead to a salami slicing of essential services. But of course, on the back of this, we mustn't forget that the last time there was actual austerity under George Osborne and David Cameron, we saw local government cuts of up to 40% in some areas, and that is impacting everything from key local refuse collection to adult social services. Local government needs the powers, but also needs the funding to be able to do the jobs in which we all expect them to be able to do competently.
Do you think you have confidence in Rachel Reeves? Because I was looking back at Labour's greatest hits, removing the winter fuel allowance for 10 million pensioners, cutting welfare benefits for the disabled, hammering farmers with inheritance tax, clobbering small businesses, the employer national insurance contribution, which doesn't come in, I think, for another 6 days or thereabouts. Do you have confidence in the government's economic plan?
I think the only person that matters to have confidence in Rachel Reeves is Keir Starmer. Now, we have to judge them, but you say greatest hits there. This government hasn't even been in office a year yet, and yet the economic prognosis is not looking great. Growth forecasts
they've managed to downgrade our prospects, haven't they?
And Labour's supply-side reforms on issues like planning are only projected to raise GDP by 0.4%. This is why it comes back to what she did in her autumn budget, where the only way that growth was achieved there was by heavy investment in public services. That's a more traditional Labour message, but that does mean tax rises, and that is how she's going to be judged against it. The fact that the only thing she said for me that's really lacked credibility is the fact that she has said openly she will not have to raise taxes again in the budget. She cannot predict real-world events that will force her to do this. The fiscal headroom of less than £10 billion is a tiny amount, and unless you want to see a continued salami slicing of integral public services, the NHS, welfare, school budgets, things like that, then the Chancellor will need to look to other sources of revenue, and that will mean going back into people's pockets.
So do you not think it was disingenuous in the election campaign to say you are not going to raise taxes or national insurance? And of course, they got around that by raising employers' national insurance contribution. We also know that 300,000 businesses are going to slash staff when that increment comes in.
I think it's a fundamentally irresponsible decision of any political party to commit not to raising taxes for the lifetime of Parliament. They cannot rule that out. It implies they have complete control over all events. I mean, the greatest example of this, philosophy diverging from events, when we saw Liz Truss invest $100 billion in an energy price guarantee, the most free market prime minister of modern times, the most free market prime minister of Margaret Thatcher, basically implementing 1970-style price controls at the cost of £100 billion worth of public borrowing. This is why parties cannot commit to such things. Maybe commit to a tax cut or not raising taxes in the first year or so, but binding your hands for the entire Parliament basically means that you are reduced to either having to cut spending or make do with what you've got.
Finally, if I may, let's just talk about this Labour MP claiming £900 expenses so a cockapoo can stay with her. This is Taiwo Owatemi, who is the MP for Coventry North West and the government whip, made the expenses claim last August. So her landlord at her second home in London issued this charge to let her cockapoo stay at the property, according to the Times. Parliamentary authorities paid the expenses claim, and I have to stress it was not in breach of the rules whatsoever. But clearly, surely, these rules need reviewing, don't they?
Well, it's another in the latest long line of farcical stories relating to MPs' expenses that the reforms of post-2010 are not finished yet. I've always been a big believer that if we want to have good quality politics, we need to be funding the running of MPs' offices properly, and that means getting rid of the expenses system, giving them a sufficient base salary, but having a staff that basically is accountable to Parliament, to the people, not to individual members as well. The simple fact is they have to claim expenses for the most silly things as well. And this is where the majority of these stories arise from, because it's largely them having to do something. You can imagine it's, anyone who's rented in London knows they don't take pets at most rented accommodation. You can see that probably having a pet is beneficial to her. But then the story comes out and it looks ridiculous. How the government deals with stories like this, including things like the freebies, free gear care, the Sabrina Carpenter ticket went to Rachel Reeves, are a measure. And this is probably a reason why something we haven't talked about has gone on, that Matthew Doyle, Keir Starmer's spin doctor, resigned after only 9 months in office last week. And if anyone's read Gabriel Pogram's and Patrick Maguire's excellent book, Get In, you'll realise there was a lot of tension around Mr Doyle's role under Sue Gray as well. The government has got a better grip of messaging in the last few weeks, but ultimately, these stories are only going to serve to distract, I think, from the main business of making sure that we are all better off, more secure and feel safer in this country.
And can I ask you cheekily, how long has Rachel Reeves got?
She's got as long as Keir Starmer will have her there, and that
how
means
long's that?
2028.
How long's
I think
that?
she's got full Parliament.
Do you really?
4 years, yeah.
Mike, really good to talk to you. Mike Indian there, political commentator. After the break, we'll take your calls, thoughts and messages. By the way, I want to talk more about this rise in household bills. Mike kind of brushed it off there, but these are absolutely astronomical, that people are going to see their water bills going up by 26%, which seems extraordinary. We're going to see electricity going up by 6.4%. That's the energy price cap. Council tax going up, as I was saying, anything between 4.99% up to 25%, depending on where you live. And at the same time, you're seeing decimation of the services that are being given to you for paying your council tax. Now, I would say if you're paying your way and if you are paying your bills, you deserve services. Your thoughts on all of that, please. This is Talk.
UK. On DAB+. On your smart speaker. On your smart TV. And on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. David Bull in for Ian Collins, 22 minutes past 2. Lots of messages coming in. Great show, David. Thanks very much. Bev in Hampshire, good afternoon to you. We don't need to smash the gangs. Take away the incentive to come here. No accommodation, no money, no driving lessons, no football matches. That would stop illegals wanting to come here and leech off the British taxpayer. It is so simple, but we're not hearing anything about it. The money saved could be used for British taxpayers. A spin-off would be, oh, this is a good one, cleaning up the beaches in France because they won't camp there if there's no incentive to come. Bev, thanks very much for this. David, this is Debbie. If the British Empire and Commonwealth is so racist and horrible that countries want their independence from it, why do their residents then want to move here? Maybe us white folk aren't that racist after all, but maybe we just enjoy our culture. And like every other country in the world, we want to keep our culture and our pride. Let's take some calls. Chris is in Epsom in Surrey. Good afternoon, Chris.
Good afternoon, David. We've spoken before.
We have, Chris, on many occasions.
Yeah. I'm going to bring you back to something we talked about before. When Theresa May was Home Secretary in 2013, and she bought out the vans to send around the higher immigration areas, saying if you don't have a visa, go home.
Yes.
The estimated overstayers, that's people arriving, the 40,000 you're talking about, people arriving with a student visa or a work visa, and they're not leaving. We've since found out that, by the way, we don't keep a record of if they leave. It was estimated then it was 1.3 million. That was 12 years ago. Mm-hmm. We've had 12 years of this. Now, nobody's done anything about it. Now, there is an opportunity here at the moment, as always, if anybody takes it up. Now, Starmer's having his little pet talking today. Now, one of the countries that's attending is Albania.
Yes.
Now, Albania has built, ready to go, 2 detention centres capable of holding 40,000 detainees while they're assessed. They were originally for Maloney, for Italy.
That's right.
But that's fallen through. It's not gone ahead. A court in Rome stopped her. Now, if Yvette Cooper is serious about using a third country, it's sitting there, a ready-cooked chicken, ready to go, and we already have an understanding and a working agreement with Albania. So we already know the people, we already trust them. So why can't we approach them and use something that's already there, built for that purpose?
Well, you touch on a very good point. If there is political will, is there?
There isn't any political will, and there's something else I want to ask as well. The immigration courts, right, and all these appeals. Okay, if you're subject to a criminal prosecution, you're allowed one appeal. If that appeal fails, then you have to go to judicial review. A judicial review will cost you between £15,000 and £25,000.
Yep.
Now, you don't get legal aid for a judicial review. How comes this Nigerian woman had 8 appeals and was only granted leave to stay because she joined a prescribed terrorist organisation in the country she was going back?
And I share your outrage with regards to all of these examples of people who've been allowed to stay in this country. And, of course, I think the government is looking at then sending notes to judges to advise them on the interpretation of the law as it is under Article 8 of the ECHR. Good to talk to you, Chris. Let's squeeze a call in from Philippa in Dorset. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, David. I must say that you're looking very dapper today.
That's very kind. Thank you very much.
You were amazing in Birmingham. I was 2 rows from the podium. I could almost touch you. It was an incredible event. Thank you for what you did.
Oh, well, thank you very much. That's very kind.
I would like to say that the solution to illegal migration is very, very simple. And Keir Starmer hasn't got the testicular fortitude to put it into practice. What he needs to do is just stop all the incentives, the benefits the hotels, the free driving lessons, the free whatever that's being given to people coming in, because Sweden are doing it. And then the immigrants are deciding that they're just going to go back to their own countries because they're not getting the help that they expect to get. And if word got around that Great Britain was doing that, then you'd find that we wouldn't have all these boats coming in the first place, and it wouldn't cost us a fortune.
So if you say that, and I say that, and everyone else is saying that, stop the incentives, don't make it so easy to come over, that you need to have offshore processing, allow those people who are actually justified to remain in the UK to be here, but then actually deport anyone else from this country. If you're saying it, I'm saying it, everyone else with rational, sane thinking is saying it, why isn't the government?
Because, like Georgina said earlier, it's all to do with votes. It's all to do with Labour getting people that are going to vote for them. If they get rid of identification in elections, then it's just going to be easy for them to stay in power. And that's what they want. They're just self-serving. That's what they're doing. And this is what this migration policy is all about.
Can I just ask you a question, which is that clearly immigration is a massive issue politically across the board. Now, you've got various political parties. I have to be slightly careful what I say on air, but you've got various political parties. Reform UK wants to leave the ECHR. Kemi Badenoch is coming round to the idea of possibly leaving the ECHR. Labour now talking about giving advice to judges to say the interpretation of EU law needs to be revised. Just in terms of the priorities, though, my reading of it, and talking to people like yourself, people all over the country, actually, is immigration is right up there in terms of priority for people in this country.
Yeah, well, we need to leave the ECHR. That's a definite thing. We're out of Europe. We're an independent country. That's why Brexit happened. The public voted on that. So we should be able to make our own laws, our own minds up on what we want and who we want coming into this country.
And Sorry, carry on.
Go on.
Well, I was just going to say, do you think Keir Starmer really does want to smash the gangs, or is Nigel Farage right that he's smashing records?
It's rhetoric, and Nigel is completely right when he says that Keir's doing absolutely nothing. Nigel said it on Friday evening. He said he wanted to stop people coming in on boats and people coming in on the back of the lorries, and I believe him, because that's what really should be happening in this country, to stop this huge bill that taxpayers are having to foot to have these immigration laws in. And I just think it's so wrong. We should be helping our own, helping the disabled, the elderly, all those things, all the benefits that are being cut for people who really, really need it.
Philippa, really good to talk to you. That's Philippa in Dorset on migration. David, this is this border summit, what a complete joke. All the summit will achieve is to further boost Starmer's ego. I'm keen this afternoon to understand whether you believe that actually Starmer does want to smash the gangs, or is he just keen, as we heard from Philippa, to allow many people into this country. The demographic is changing in this country. Those people are more likely to vote. If they can vote, they're more likely to vote Labour. There is a fundamental shift going on in the fabric of this country. Your thoughts on all of that, please. 0344 499 1000. After the break, I want to talk about Justin Welby. Disgraced ex-Archbishop Justin Welby says he forgives serial paedophile who attacked 130 boys and men. I'm going to be talking to Rabbi Dr. Jonathan Romain, MBE, who's a broadcaster and a social campaigner. That's all coming up here on Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. This is Talk, 2:30 on Monday, March the 31st. I'm David Bull, in for Ian Collins. Let's talk about Justin Welby now. He told the BBC he forgives a serial abuser at the heart of a scandal that led to his resignation as the Archbishop of Canterbury. This is the first interview, actually, that he's given since he quit in November of last year. He said his forgiveness of John Smythe, arguably the most prolific abuser associated with the Church of England, was irrelevant, and it was more important to help victims rebuild their lives. Just to remind you, Smythe died in 2018. He attacked more than 100 boys and young men in the UK and Africa over decades. There was a damning report in 2024, and it found that Justin Welby could, and I'm quoting, could and should have done more to bring Smythe to justice, which the former Archbishop says he feels a deep sense of personal failure over. Well, joining me now is Rabbi Dr. Jonathan Romain, MBE, who's a broadcaster and social campaigner. Good afternoon to you. What are your initial thoughts on this? The first interview that Justin Welby has given, he said he forgives the Church of England serial paedophile John Smythe. Just before you answer that, let's listen to him speaking to Laura Koonsberg on the BBC about his resignation.
It did cause profound upset, and I am profoundly ashamed of that, and I apologised within 24 hours, and I remain deeply ashamed. It's one of those moments where, when I think of it, I just wince. It was entirely wrong and entirely inexcusable.
What were you thinking?
I wasn't in a good space at the time. I shouldn't have done a valedictory speech at all.
Jonathan, your thoughts?
Well, I mean, it's good that he admits responsibility, because obviously it was a blot on both the church and his personal career, because he'd had a sort of a very good reputation up to that point. My first thought when I heard that he said he would forgive John Smythe I was really taken aback, actually, because although on the one hand it does sound, quite noble, but I thought, well, goodness gracious me, what is the effect of those words, I forgive John Smythe, on the victims? How will they feel, particularly because they felt so ignored, almost like double abused, firstly by John Smythe and then by the church not listening in the way it should have done. And then the other thought was, my goodness, actually, it's not your call. You can't forgive somebody else on behalf of other people. The only people who can forgive a perpetrator are the victims themselves. So it was very nice of him to say those words, but actually it doesn't really count for much. And I think he sort of admitted that when he said it's irrelevant, because it's only the people a person abused who can actually give that forgiveness.
I think you're absolutely right. What he did was utterly abhorrent to those young men and boys. It is not up to Justin Welby to forgive. It is up to those people who were abused at the hands of Smythe. And actually, when you read some of the testimonials from Smythe's victims, there's one here from Graham. He made a complaint in 2013. He said he would never forgive Welby. He said in 2017, if he had contacted us and said, I will come up and apologise to you personally, I'm sorry, I messed up, this is Welby, I would have forgiven him immediately, but he never has, and he never has on those terms.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, in a slight mitigation of Welby, I sort of know what he feels like, because I also been in that situation where I worked with somebody for many years, trusted them, respected them, and then found out that they were actually a child abuser. And I can remember the sense of shock and betrayal, so I can quite understand why Welby was so personally hurt, and maybe he can forgive John Smythe for the way that it sort of led to Welby's own downfall. But as we both said, it's only the victims. And that really begs an interesting question, doesn't it? Is even the victims, can they just willy-nilly sort of forgive John Smythe, or anybody actually, because he's dead, or does it have to be earned? In other words, does the person have to first of all admit their guilt, then show repentance, then apologise, certainly face judicial action, whether it's a prison sentence or a fine or a community service, whatever's appropriate? In other words, is forgiveness something you just dole out because it's on your conscience, or does it actually have to be earned by the perpetrator first?
So this was the 2024 Macon report. It said his brutal abuse, this is Smythe, was on an industrial scale, concluded opportunities to investigate Smythe over his abuse were missed, including when evidence was presented to Welby in 2013. So we're talking about 11 years where Welby knew he had evidence, did nothing about it, and so you have someone who is influential in the church who is essentially protecting and covering the church.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing good to say about it. That's why he paid the penalty of not only losing his job, but also having the disgrace. So I think the first person in, 1,000 years, Archbishop, to be jettisoned from office. I mean, it's really quite unheard of, and he's going to live with that for the rest of his days. Just to go back on something we talked about, David, this idea of only victims can forgive and whether it has to be earned or not. There is another aspect to this, is that sometimes, and I've seen this in person, a victim can forgive the perpetrator even though they haven't apologised, because it's a way of sort of letting go. In other words, it's not justice, but it means that victim is not necessarily carrying the anger, the resentment, like an albatross around their neck, and it doesn't poison the rest of their life. And so that's almost like having a double penalty, not only the initial abuse that you suffered, but then letting it sort of control the rest of your life as well. And if you can at least stop it where it ended and not carry it through for the rest of your career, your life, your relationships, and you want to let go, then I think it would be justified to forgive somebody without them actually even admitting guilt. But
well, you touch on something really important here, which is he has destroyed the lives of these 120 young men and boys. And of course, the impact of that, and many of them will remain silent about what happened and the ramifications of that, the denting of their emotional relationships, their social relationships, their interpersonal relationships. And of course, you mention forgiveness there, but actually, isn't it for many of those victims trying to come to terms with it, to try and move on in their lives?
Yes, that's totally right. They've got to try and put it behind them. Now, whether that means forgiving him in their hearts, of course, if he was still alive, there'd be no question about trying to extradite him from wherever he went. I think it was Australia, wasn't it?
It was.
And bringing him to justice in this court. But perhaps because he's dead, the real message from this is to anybody watching this programme right now, if you know of somebody who is abusing but is not being brought to light, speak out. You've got to speak out, both for the sake of the people he has or she has already abused, and also for those that they may go on to abuse. With this abuse case in the church has actually been going on, as you said, a very long time, and people are still getting away with it. We've got to stop them escaping justice.
And that's a really good point. What is it about these institutions like the church where abuse seems to be tolerated? It seems to be endemic. We hear case after case after case and nothing is done. What is it about those institutions, like the church, for example, that seems to protect the predator?
Yes, it's actually very strange because, of course, it's not just the church, is it?
No.
I mean, all institutions, and I don't want to say that other faiths don't have abusers, whether it's rabbis or imams or whatever, and within the police or even in, bosses in businesses, everybody, unfortunately, is prone to it. But somehow the church has been a hotbed, almost a safety net for people to hide and abuse. And obviously it's partly to do with authority. And it's not just the authority of having a peak cat like a boss does, but the authority of God, the big boss in the sky, so to speak. And that maybe gives them the power to do things. But somehow, but you could say that about so many things in the probation service, in the scouts, and yes, there are rotten apples here and there, but somehow there seems to be, basket loads of rotten apples in the church. And if I was a vicar, I would be quite ashamed of what some of my fellow priests were doing.
Do you think there's a problem here? Because if it's in any other sector of public life, there would be an inquiry, it would be an external inquiry, and we would have the conclusions drawn from that. Is part of the problem that actually the church marks its own homework, so it investigates any potential abuse, it decides what the punishment will be, and actually last month the General Synod, which is the governing body, as you know, of the Church of England, rejected a proposal that would have made safeguarding fully independent. Surely that is only the beginning of this conversation.
You're spot on, and it's really quite extraordinary that the church didn't allow outside investigation in the way that it should have. If this had been the very first week of such cases, they could have dismissed it of, oh, well, it's a one-off. But as you say, it's been 20 years or more, and certainly even the Catholic Church, both here and in Ireland, it just been one story after another. And you'd have thought by now they would have got the message. And what that vote in Synod, which didn't allow external authority to come in, shows that the Church, or certainly the hierarchy, has not yet got the message that abuse is wrong and that somehow they are covering it up. And this is perhaps why a lot of people, sadly, have left the Church. I say sadly because most vicars actually do a tremendous job on very low pay, against the odds, overworked, and are there for all sorts of people in their local parish. But the institution itself has got something rotten at the centre.
Just in terms of that, we're seeing falling congregations in the Church of England. We're seeing a shift, as I mentioned, actually, the demographic fabric making up this country. We're seeing that. We're seeing the Church of England. You mentioned their vicars not being paid very much, but actually the Church of England is a massive landowner, has a lot of money. What lessons does the Church need to do? Also, what does the Church, and I will focus on the Church, need to do to restore trust from the public?
Well, with the one caveat that it's not just the Church.
No, indeed.
Everybody else is blameless, and we've all got rogue rabbis or whatever. They have to have a new leader who doesn't come from the sort of rather tired, institutionalized leaders that they have at the moment. They've got to have a completely new brush, who's not tarnished, and who can really... It doesn't need to be a theologian. It just needs to be someone with common sense who can look at the Church and say, we've got to change, and who can make it change. Now, to give slight credit to Welby, he did try and do certain things. So it's not as if he ignored everything. He may have ignored Smythe and other cases, but he was aware of the problem. But he wasn't aware enough, and he didn't move fast enough. Someone's going to have to make a really big change to the way the Church operates and is perceived to operate, because it's not just a matter of doing things behind closed doors. It's got to show the public that it's woken up to the problem and it's going to do something about it. That would be the case in any other realm of this country, in business or other public bodies. The Church has got to do the same, and it's really strange that somehow it hasn't done that so far.
Jonathan, very good to talk to you. Rabbi Dr. Jonathan Romain, MBE, broadcaster and social campaigner. Your thoughts on that, please. Lots of you getting in touch. Andy in the Wirral says, how can Justin Welby forgive John Smythe? It's Smythe's victims who are the only people who can forgive. Keep all of those coming in, please. Also, we were talking earlier about Keir Starmer, and I mentioned that he didn't even mention Mother's Day in his various ramblings on Twitter or X or whatever it's called these days. David, this is Neil. The reason Keir Starmer didn't mention Mother's Day is because he's not actually sure what a woman is, and therefore he doesn't know what a mother is either. Keep all of your thoughts coming in, please. 0344 499 1000. After the break, your calls, thoughts and messages. This is Talk.
UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. This is Talk 248, Monday, March the 31st. Keir Starmer says he is angry about illegal immigration into the UK. He urged countries from around the world to work together to stop people smuggling gangs in the same way they would terrorists. This is the first ever organised immigration crime summit in London. He says illegal migration is a massive driver of global insecurity. And yet when you look at the numbers, 6,000 illegal migrants this year alone. Since he came to power, and we've heard repeatedly, smash the gangs, 25,000, I think 4,000 came in last week or something thereabouts. They on the first, pretty much the first day they came into power, they scrapped the Rwanda policy. We have no idea whether that would have worked or not, but it had that tortuous passage through the House of Commons and then it got royal assent, and so therefore it was going through. And of course we never found out whether it was actually going to pay dividends, and many of you are very angry about that. Sonny is in Newquay. Good afternoon.
Hello, David.
Hi there, good afternoon. Your thoughts, please, on this illegal migration. Keir Starmer, very angry, smash the gangs, he's going to get on top of illegal migration.
Yeah, Keir Starmer will be angry, but the only way to stop the boats is to make legal representations to the ECHR on humanitarian grounds.
I'm listening.
And loss of life grounds, to make France financially and legally liable for every illegal migrant that crossed the channel.
Right. So the thing is that what he keeps talking about is upstream, so that we're going to give more and more money to all of these countries to stop the migration crisis, to stop people coming across Europe. So we're seeing this problem in Italy and in Germany and in France, and then of course they come across the Channel, then they're in the United Kingdom. Now Keir Starmer could actually do something about it. This litany of failure where we've seen all these decisions made by British judges based on the ECHR Article 8 right to a family life, whereas they could, it is advisory, so therefore they could ignore it. And so therefore is the answer to say to judges, you're misinterpreting this. By the way, in Europe, the judges are not as lenient as they are here.
I can completely agree with that, but like I said, nobody has made representations to the ECHR that we've got loss of life in the Channel, and France, or, you know, they're letting illegal migrants come across, where, you know, nobody said that to France or the EU, that, you know, we've got to make legal representations to the ECHR and say this is not acceptable, you know, that France should be legally liable for this.
But do you get the sense, Keir Starmer keeps saying he wants to tackle this problem. He says he's going to smash the gangs. Do you actually believe him that he actually wants to do something about it?
I don't believe him at all. I don't believe Keir Starmer on anything. I don't believe him on democracy. I don't believe in the Brexit, which we should have been of our borders. You know, Conservatives have been a big part of this. Sir David Frost, he did not agree on the Brexit, agrees that, you know, a return agreement for illegals and criminals back to the EU, which to me is a scandal.
Good to hear from you, Sonny. Thanks for your call. Keep all of your messages coming in, please, about illegal immigration. Keir Starmer saying it makes him angry. He's got this global crackdown. So he says that the answer to all of this is basically to pump yet more money into some of these other countries to stop the migration happening in the first place. We'll talk more about that, but we'll just have a pause because it's now time to find out how you could be in with a chance of winning Oasis tickets at Wembley this very summer.
How'd you fancy winning tickets to the hottest gig of the century? Here at Talk, we're giving you the chance to bag yourself a pair of tickets to Oasis at Welby this summer. Plus, we're giving away a whopping 10 grand and putting you up for the weekend in a London hotel. All you need to do is text the word prize to 83338 and you're in the draw. Alternatively, you can enter by post. Once again, all you need to do is text the word prize to 83338 or you can enter by post. Good luck.
18 plus UK excluding Northern Ireland. Enter by text for £2 plus one standard network charge by 11 p.m. on the 7th of April 2025. Or post your name and number to Oasis Competition, PO Box 3190. Colchester CO2 8GP to arrive by 5 p.m. on the 10th of April 2025. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com.
This is a News Broadcasting Network promotion.
There you go. Mike Graham telling you how you can win that competition for Oasis tickets. Let's take another caller now on immigration, illegal immigration into this country. Saeed is on the line. Good afternoon.
Yeah, hello. Yes, hi there. Look, I don't trust Starmer on anything, whether it's on pensioners or disability or now his pledges on immigration. The reality is he's trying to talk tough about smashing the gangs, which is the same sort of ridiculous, jingoistic sort of commentary that Rishi Sunak used to talk about, or stop the boats. The reality is that irregular arrivals are only 3% of immigrants coming into the country.
Yeah.
We should have a quick system of screening them, making sure that people who are not eligible are returned and people who are eligible are allowed to work and be part of society. But instead, we have these crazy ideas like, oh, let's send them to Rwanda, which cost us £240 million.
It was more, actually. It was about 300 million. And I think three Home Secretaries went. It was 100 million per Home Secretary. And, of course, but the thing about that is that it was never allowed to see it through. So I would have preferred to actually see if the deterrent had worked. And, of course, Keir Starmer, the first thing he does is he actually ditches the policy without even seeing whether it worked.
No, but we are running sociological experiments about deterrence and whether it works or not, which is in hundreds of millions of pounds without doing any research on whether they'll be valid or not. So, for example, we have this belief that asylum seekers should not be allowed to work. Now, if you tell them you cannot work, then obviously you'll have to put them up in hotels and other places because otherwise, how is he going to live? So, we should screen these guys. Look, genuinely, I can tell in a 15-minute conversation if somebody is from Pakistan or Afghanistan or Iraq, and we should screen them and let them work so that they're no longer a burden on our society. The same thing we did with the Ukrainian refugees. Instead, we put them into hotels, the bills run up, etc., and it's just like the worst way to spend our hard-earned cash.
And if we think back to the illegal migration bill under the Conservatives, if you remember, they said arrivals on small boats cannot claim asylum, so that was then invalid. You will be detained for 28 days, removed. Any future claim is then invalid. There will be safe and legal routes into this country. So that seemed to be going in the right direction. We've now got this enormous backlog, haven't we, in terms of the processing. Just in terms of your own policy, would you favour processing in the United Kingdom, or do we have offshore processing?
Look, I think we should have processing in the United Kingdom, but we need to make it quicker, right? And it cannot take months and months and years for this processing, number one. Number two, I think criminalizing anybody who comes in, because there are no safe legal routes. If you are a female judge in Afghanistan trying to escape from the Taliban, you cannot board a flight. You will be caught, you will be prevented, etc. So there are lots of people who are genuine asylum seekers who do not have legal routes. So unless you open legal routes which are meaningful, so not a legal route which allows 10 people a year, right? I mean, there's no point calling it a legal route. So unless you do that, you have to do processing in-house, on shore, but we need to really speed it up because it should not take months and years to determine these things.
Yeah, and what do you think about the numbers that have come here? I mentioned these incredible numbers, 6,000 this year and, of course, 25,000 since Starmer came to power in just 6 months. I mean, so, in fact, we're seeing a meteoric rise in the number of people coming here. And, of course, the lure is that, as you say, they're being looked after and hoteled and they're being given English lessons. They have buses to go shopping. It's ridiculous.
No, but look, the numbers look big, but if you look at the fact that we welcomed 1.2 million migrants to our shore last year, actually it was the last year of the Conservative government, right? So this so-called sort of anti-immigrant government, more than 1.2 million people came.
Yeah.
So relative to that, 6,000, 30,000 is a speck in the ocean.
No, I understand that, but the net migration figure was 745,000,
Yes.
so 750,000. But the premise to that, and there's another story today, which is actually the number of people coming here on work visas or student visas and then overstaying is extraordinary. And of course, they don't even know where they are.
Yes. No, exactly. So I think we need to tighten up a lot of our processes, right? But there are certain delays which are so expensive, and that is because we don't let them work, right?
Yes.
And that is because we have this assumption that if we let them work, somehow that it will be a magnet. Look, somebody needs to provide some basic research on whether that assumption is true or not, right? Because I don't want to be paying for anybody who's able-bodied and is willing to work but is prevented from working.
Really good point, Saeed. Thank you very much for your call. That's Saeed there talking about the migrant crisis. The only thing Starmer is smashing is our once great country. We need to leave the ECHR and get some grown-ups onto the problem of illegal immigration. That's Clive in Solihull. Hi, David. Nice to see you. The French will take to the streets after this Le Pen ruling. It won't be long before we in the UK do the same unless we can reverse much of the legal and illegal migration. That's Sally there. More to come. Don't go anywhere. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
a very good afternoon to you. 3 o'clock already on Monday. 3 o'clock already on Monday, March the 31st. I'm David Bull in for Ian Collins. Thanks very much for your company this afternoon. Now, coming up in this hour, Prime Minister Keir Starmer says illegal immigration to the UK makes him angry as he urged countries from around the world to work together to stop people smuggling gangs in the same way they would terrorists. Meanwhile, Britain faces a fresh two-tier justice row with ethnic minority criminal suspects being given priority by judges considering bail under new guidelines drawn up by the Ministry of Justice. And Donald Trump has lashed out at Vladimir Putin and threatened new sanctions against Russia as attempts to negotiate a Ukraine ceasefire stalled. Do get in touch, please. You can call us. You can leave a voice note as well. The number 0344 499 1000. You can text the word talk and your message to 87222. You can also message us at talkTV. Big question for you this afternoon. Is Keir Starmer actually intent on smashing the gangs, or is he intent on smashing records? That's according to Nigel Farage. Your thoughts on all of the above, please. Well, a very good afternoon. Thanks for your company. Loads of you getting in touch this afternoon. Sue, thanks for this. Good afternoon. Lovely surprise to see you this afternoon. To stop this illegal migration, apart from the blindly obvious of stopping the incentives from our government, surely the European countries should combine, stop the crossings at the Mediterranean Sea. That way they don't enter Europe and they do not have the opportunity to abuse the idiotic ECHR. David, until we tackle the reasons they're drawn to our country, very little will make a difference to the rate of migrants arriving. We're the problem. We need to be the solution. We need to stop blaming everyone else. Lots of other messages coming in as well. Also talking about Southport. I want to talk about that now. This one says, whilst the riots can never be condoned, we must remember that there are many people still languishing in prison due to Starmer's deliberate deceit and lies. This is truly disgusting, and democracy under Starmer and the Labour left is being openly eroded. We are in sinister times. Let's talk more about the Southport riots now. This is a really interesting article, actually. In the Telegraph, Lord Sewell has claimed that Guardian editors helped to create the conditions for the Southport riots. He's a peer. He previously led an inquiry into racial disparities in Britain. He said the liberal elite had long ignored the plight of the white working classes for too long. He said it's inconvenient for publications like The Guardian to cover struggling white communities and instead preferred to promote ideas of racial victimhood. He argued that the elite disregard for struggling white communities helped to fan the flames of discontent and fed into riots that took place following the Southport attack in 2024. Joining us now is Zoe Strimple, who's a historian, columnist, author and broadcaster. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
What do you make of Lord Sewell's comments? I've talked a lot, extensively actually, about the white working class boys, sort of left on this pile of... They've just left without any kind of ambition, aspiration. They've been left to their own devices. And for far too long, in my humble opinion, they've been ignored.
Well, it's funny. I was actually in the exact same panel as Lord Sewell, on which that article was based. So I was sitting there right next to him.
And this was the Oxford Literary Festival, right?
Exactly, as that debate was unfolding. And so I interpreted his comments about The Guardian slightly differently because... I'm a bit less pity party for the white male, and I think Lord Sewell actually also said it is also partly up to people themselves, the communities themselves, to kind of snap out of things and try to kind of, get out of, improve their lot. So it's not just the poor white male. He's 100% a victim. For me, the role of the Guardian is that it's a symbol of the atmosphere that has been peddled and enforced by the government and by institutional culture more broadly, which is that anything that can be turned into an accusation of racism or Islamophobia, it can't be said, which means you cannot have honest conversations about terrorism being imported by migrants who may come from countries that have more, more of that kind of ideology, who hate the West, who mean us harm, things like that. And, the Guardian is just a symbol of those incredibly strict speech rules, so that you get to the point that you have these people who are frustrated and horrified by the fact that time after time there's a horrendous massacre, which is terrorism, and time after time an Al-Qaeda manual is found on those people. And time after time, those people are not the white working class. Those people are not right-wing extremists. Those people are unassimilated minorities who've arrived as migrants, either this generation or past generation, and they have not been assimilated. And so that then leads to this incredible well of anger. And then this kind of coming down like a ton of bricks on people for so-called misinformation. Well, the government kind of completely concealed the fact that he had an Al-Qaeda training manual and he'd been referred for the PREVENT program. So, oh no, we weren't possibly to make a connection with Islamist terrorism. No, this was someone born in Cardiff. People are tired of that. Whether that's an issue of the white working class, that's one way of looking at it. I actually think it's actually about the wisdom of people who are tired of being, who can sniff out the lies. That I have to say is separate from the riots themselves, which are obviously like hideous.
No, of course. And we can't condone violence in any sense, but there is definitely...
No, and the full force of, just one last thing, the full force of the law should have been applied to them. But you know who else it should be applied to? Those people on the Gaza marches who glorify terrorism and the mass murder of Jews, but they never get even a fraction of that.
So why is that?
Better if everyone was treated
Why
like that.
Is that? Are we living in a two-tier society?
Well, there's two things there. We're absolutely living in a two-tier society, and the Sentencing Council has made that abundantly clear by saying, very brazenly and explicitly, we should literally give people from a certain set of ethnic minority backgrounds a lighter ride in the justice system. And there's a second thing, which is Jews who are not considered fair game. So the police will come down like a ton of bricks on people who misgender people, who are caught being racist. But for some reason, when it comes to glorifying second Holocausts and making Jews feel incredibly unsafe, not in a kind of airy-fairy snowflake way, but actually nothing. So these orgies of Hamas glorification can take place every single week, and that is something specific to do with the relationship between Jews and the woke and the kind of who's considered to be the ever-present enemy in our midst. That's a feature. That's where the two-tier stuff.
Well, let's just disentangle that, because ethnic minority criminal suspects given priority, as you mentioned, by judges considering bail. So it seems extraordinary to me that there is going to be one set of rules for one group of people and another set of rules for other people, dependent on their race, their nationality, their creed, etc., etc. That is wrong, indefensible, as far as I can see. But just in terms of this, the way that the law is being interpreted and the way that the government is turning a blind eye, as you say, to some of these marches that are taking place, what is driving government? Is it because they're totally inept? Is it because they're deeply out of touch? Or is it because they're frightened?
I think it's also something else more obvious, which is that some of them agree. They kind of do think that, like, Palestine should rise up and, get those colonizers out. I mean, that is very deeply embedded in the left. I agree that, Starmer, and also on the Sentencing Council, he's actually been quite impressive here. They are going to not tolerate the Sentencing Council two-tier justice thing. It seems to me they will legislate that away. Yeah. Starmer's whole identity, this government has been about, being the anti-Corbyn. So they're supposed to be better at this, but they're not really. I mean, they don't really understand why those protests are so evil and so dangerous. So they buy, I think they willingly, it is ineptitude, but it's fear, but it's also willingly and consciously buying the line that they're mostly peaceful, blah, blah, blah. You have to, we can't always you can't always get them off the hook for responsibility. It can't just be about incompetence. They have access to the same books, information, history as everyone else, and they are choosing to be spineless. And some of them seem to believe that it's, all this, it's freedom of protest, freedom of speech. Oh yeah, suddenly now it's freedom of speech when it's glorifying terrorism. But I think you're absolutely right with fear. I think the fear of appearing racist, fine, but Islamophobic is the single biggest danger, I think. It stops us from treating the threat of terrorism as it should be treated, because God forbid you say the threat of terrorism from fundamentalist Islamists is much more than that from far right. You can't say that. So you end up misdirecting resources. And I think this government is absolutely part of that. They cannot have the honest conversation. Now, it's very hard to do that without sounding, I certainly don't want to sound like a far right person who's racist or Islamophobic, because I don't think that's accurate. But it really concerns me that the T word, terrorism, is never properly discussed in relation to the sorts of people that do it and why are they doing that. And so, that I think this government is egregious in failing to kind of tackle that issue. And the reason that they are not doing that is, as you say, morbid fear of being seen as being Islamophobic. And actually, you can live your life, they can continue like that. And in the end, these problems will get so much worse, and the working class or whoever it is who sees through it, who aren't in the kind of so-called North London dinner table, although I always like to say it's not North London anymore, it's Southeast London. They just, people can tell they're being fed lies. So it's going to get more and more extreme. Their reactions will get more and more extreme. There will be more riots.
And of course, the government very keen to define what Islamophobia is. The real concern here is about the lack of free speech that will entail. And you're seeing this growing resentment, as you say, from people who can see what is going on in this country. If you are not allowed to talk openly about fear or indeed terrorism or threats to this country, it will be driven underground. And that is what we are starting to see. We are sleepwalking into a dystopian authoritarian society.
It's exactly, and we don't have the cultural confidence to say, do you know what? So my personal view is that immigration is a good thing, and I don't actually see any reason that people on boats should be bad, new citizens to this country if they are assimilated, if they want to work hard, if they don't mean us harm. But we need to have some sort of robust idea of what that even means. What does it mean to want to mean us harm? What are our values? What do we insist upon? What does assimilation look like? And if we can't get our act together or have the confidence, all we can do is self-flagellate and say, oh no, we can't have Easter decorations in school. Yeah. Christmas is offensive. This kind of stuff is just, it's destroying us, because it just means, well, anyone could just, we have to give equal respect to people who don't believe in women's rights, or who think Jews should all be murdered or whatever, and who believe conspiracy theories and lies. And it can't be like that, because immigration could be a phenomenal force for good, and we just aren't facing it in that way. And then what ends up happening is that it is just a force for bad instead of for good. And then of course it ends up with these extremely troubling public demonstrations that do seem xenophobic and violent and thuggish and hooliganish and things like that. And it's entirely because of the way these things are, shushed, lied about, things that aren't okay are pretended to be okay. And if you question them, you're racist. But and then in the end, you do get a lot of racism. So they're all mixed together. It's not, it's complicated stuff, but the absence of clear language around it is the single biggest. I'm sure a lot of people in this country would be very grateful for some clear, honest, brave analysis of the situation from on high, and there's no way they're going to get it.
Zoe, I could talk to you all day. Thanks for your time. Zoe Strimple there, historian, columnist, author and broadcaster. Joining me now, Frank Haviland, editor of The New Conservative. Zoe made a great deal of sense there. The fact is, she talked about a lack of integration, people living in silos, no overarching kind of value, British value. Your thoughts?
I'd go a bit further than that. I don't think mass immigration is a good thing for any country, and certainly not Britain. I think it's probably the worst crime and betrayal that's ever been.
Is it immigration, or is it the speed of immigration?
Yeah, but if 90% of them coming across are men, that takes away every argument that you've given, which is that we need to rescue these people from war-torn countries.
I don't think I gave those arguments. I think the government did.
Well, yeah, but you've got to keep the women and children and back home to deal with the wars, but the men have to come over here. That's every argument taken care of. So the Southport. I mean, you mentioned the who is it, Lord Sewell, the Southport atrocity. He's wrong. If he thinks the Guardian has the slightest thing to do with fanning the flames compared to every section of Britain, every authority, everyone responsible for dealing with equality before the law, which is what we should have. The Guardian exists, no one takes the Guardian seriously. It exists for two reasons only, one of which is to push the latest anti-white, anti-British line by people that hate the country so much they're never going to leave it, and for multi-millionaire BBC lovies to pretend that they're socialists at dinner parties. You can't parody the Guardian. Every time they put something up as a parody of The Guardian, people believe it's a normal headline because that's what they write. So it's nothing to do with The Guardian. It is much deeper, much simpler thing. It's a guy who went on a rampage because he hated Britain. He had no allegiance to the country. He didn't care about it. And he chose the target they nearly always choose, which is little, and they're usually white girls because they can't fight back. He went round, committed one of the most heinous crimes, certainly in my lifetime. And the reason he did that is because we've got open borders. We have had since Blair. No one asked for it. No one agreed for it. They did it deliberately. And they pretend that they can't do anything about it. And the worst side of that coin
is the people like Keir Starmer. 14 years of Tory government, yeah, they were a joke. Keir Starmer lied to the British public. He came out straight away and he said this wasn't terrorism.
Correct.
He's not a Muslim. We don't know anything about it. We don't know anything about it, but I know what it isn't. And if you say it is, we're going to lock you up. What did he do? He cleaned out the prisons of the violent criminals and put in people for tweeting. Then 3 months later, he had to admit that they did know, which of course they would have. The police would have been over that place in hours, if not minutes. They knew there was ricin. They knew he'd been referred to prevent. They knew he had an Al-Qaeda training manual. He lied. He should be on trial for treason, as far as I'm concerned.
Let me just ask you about this other story. Ethnic minority suspects given priority for bail. This is the new sentencing guidelines, and I was asking earlier whether we're living in a two-tier society. These guidelines are due to take effect tomorrow. They require judges to consider an offender's racial, cultural or religious background when deciding whether to impose a custodial or community punishment. That is unacceptable.
Yeah, but no more unacceptable than everything you've had for the last 10, 20 years. We know this is going. Everyone in Britain pretends that they're for equality, that they don't support racism. But you know what they support? Racism against white people. Every single day of the week, headlines: white toxic masculinity, white working class, the cause of all ills in society. And yet that is the group that is the hardest hit, the worst performing demographic in terms of education, in terms of poverty. Why? Because no one cares, because there's no value sticking up for white working class men. They're the patriarchy. They're supposed to be doing great at everything. So this is no shock. This can be no shock to anyone. The Labour government are the people that wanted this. Now they're backtracking on it because they're actually going to get what they want, and then they're seen for what they are, which is they want a divided society with the white working class at the bottom, who they no longer need for votes. So of course they're standing up pretending they don't want it. But this is exactly what they've wanted. The joke is why the Conservative Party allowed this to go on for 14 years in power. That's why they got kicked out.
Let me just push you on that. Why would they want the white working class to be the undertrodden?
Because the white working class have no validity. They have no commercial value in terms of identity, politics and diversity. It doesn't get you anywhere, especially if you're Labour. This was worse when the Conservatives were doing it, because they're kind of supposed to stick up for equality before the law. The Labour Party has, since Blair, set its stall on anyone but native white Brits, preferably men. We want your votes. We're going to stick up for you. What did Starmer do the minute the Southport atrocity came out? He said it was far-right thuggery, meaning, you know, objecting to the slaughter of little girls was something. It's okay if it's Just Stop Oil or pro-Palestine, but little girls getting killed, you know, it's just bad taste. He said, we stand with you. What did the police do? We're going to have special cordons around the mosques. What have the police been saying this week? We won't tolerate any disrespect during Eid. There is the Labour Party believes that everyone is worth defence except toxic white males, because there's no value sticking up for them. So they're always going to be doing that. But now they've been found out. Now they've got a problem.
Frank, thank you very much for your time. Frank Haviland, editor of The New Conservatives. Your thoughts on that, please. The ethnic minority suspects given priority for bail. Also, this idea from Lord Sewell that Guardian editors helped cause the Southport riots. And, of course, the idea that the government lied to the public, which obviously fuelled, and of course I can't condone any violence of any sort at all, but it fuelled the lack of information, that void of information, and people responded as a result of poor communication from government. Your thoughts on all of the above, please. Lots of you getting in touch. The migrant conference in London must be important because Starmer is not attending this afternoon, and the team not attending this afternoon, they're in Parliament. Shows the whole thing is a joke. Best wishes. That's Jerry in Cardiff. David, it's unbelievable. You're not allowed to celebrate Christmas or Easter in schools. Christmas time is now called holiday season. Easter is completely wiped off the agenda. However, the BBC this afternoon, I saw this on BBC One, are celebrating Eid. One more. It's terrible that white working class boys are held in contempt, but haven't they brought it on themselves? Wow. Your response to that, please. After the break, I'll take your calls on that and all of the above. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
So many messages coming in. Chris in Newbury, good afternoon to you, one of our regulars. David, hi Dr. David. The least educated in the third world want to come to the UK. Safe routes give millions the chance to try their luck, and those that fail safe routes will come via illegal routes. The smartest people they have to offer us use work visas. Politicians have no intention of stopping the influx. Judges won't allow them if they wanted to. The UK has fallen. A good parent should tell their kids to get a plan to get out within 10 years. David, this is Anne in North London. Good afternoon to you. And David, there are already legal routes for real asylum seekers. I met one genuine granted asylum 15 years ago. They are very upset about the current abuses. Keir Starmer, this is Reg, says, talking about smashing the gangs. Keir Starmer keeps talking about smashing the gangs, but as we all know, Keir can't even smash a pasty. Lots of other messages coming in. Also, talking about the ECHR, Francis Moore, good afternoon to you. Francis from Wilton says, I keep raising the issue of the Northern Ireland peace process, which is embedded in the ECHR. You are right in that. I'm all for curbing the ECHR, but the issues are more domestic in judicial and legal overreach. People never address the Northern Ireland peace questions. So is there a cogent policy to see on this one? It's certainly complicated, and the ECH, I mean, the whole thing needs to be revisited as far as I can see. Hello, David. Good to see you. That's Carolyn Shoreham by Sea. Sunny Shoreham, good afternoon to you. Call that a summit. What a load of rubbish they all are. This is Mike in Lincoln. Good afternoon, David. I've been contemplating Starmer's latest guff about immigration. Why would any of the attendees of his summit want to do anything to alleviate his illegal immigration problem when to do so makes his problem into their problem? Please tell me he's not that stupid. I agree. I don't understand what they're all doing there. So we know that 40 countries are attending. So let's look at these. Albania, Vietnam, Iraq, then you've got France, the US and China amongst others. Clearly, well, is this not just a talking shop? So just in terms of this, Keir Starmer says, well, actually, we're deporting lots of people. We've deported 24,000 people who have had no right to be here. They have now been removed. When you look at those numbers, those 6,000 this year alone, 25,000 or thereabouts since Keir Starmer came to power, certainly the gangs have not been smashed. Sharon is in, my county, Suffolk. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, my darling.
How are you?
How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm all right, thanks very much indeed. Sunny in Suffolk?
Very sunny, lovely blue skies out here.
Good, I'm glad to hear it. Right, your thoughts, please.
It's a drying day.
What's that?
It's a washing dryer.
Of course
day.
it is. Of course it is. Now, apart from drying the washing, your thoughts, please, on Keir Starmer. Is he serious about smashing the gangs and illegal immigration? Because it seems to me that nothing is being done. The problem is getting worse. He got rid of Rwanda. We never knew whether it was going to work or not. We had the ping pong. It went through the House of Commons, House of Lords. It was about to be enacted, and yet he scrapped it.
Well, he needs to grow a pair of huge cojones and put his big boy pants on.
Right. And when he's done that, what's he going to do?
He needs to perhaps use the ECHR for our benefit and go to them and say, on behalf of the people of Britain, we want money from France for every illegal immigrant that they let leave their shores. We want money for each one. Work out whatever it is to keep one here for 10 years. We want that per person, the French. Or France take them back completely, straight away. They come off onto our shores, they go back onto a boat, and they go back and get dumped there. So you either pay us or you take them back.
Now, France will say they're doing all they can. We've given them, what is it, 500 million or thereabouts to France to stop the migrants. They say, well, it's impossible to control.
No, it is possible to control. You tell, Keir, the charmer, tells them this is what you're going to do.
Yeah.
For everyone you let leave your shore, we are going to charge it. Now, the French people, being what the French people are, and I know France very, very well, they will turn around to their government and say, we're not paying this. Why are we paying this? Then the French government turn around to Germany or Spain or wherever they're coming from and say, right, you take everyone that's come via your route and we're going to charge you.
So there was... Well, it's a really interesting point, actually. So I was just reading this morning that this is Yvette Cooper, who, by the way, says it's not Labour government's fault. It is actually the fault of the weather, because the weather's really good. Well, there is some truth in that. But she also revealed something about France this morning. She revealed the French government's cabinet had approved the law enforcement officers could now stop migrants' boats at sea. Now, this is the nub of this, which is that there was a ban on them stopping the dinghies at sea, which was passed in 2018. She says that this will begin later this year. It will be led by an elite 70-strong police unit known as the Compagnie du Marche, which was deployed during last summer's Paris Olympics. So she says that actually there has been a change in the law in France and that things will improve.
Is what I say to that.
Right, you don't believe her?
Darling, if she told me that tomorrow was Tuesday, I'd have to go and look it up.
So, but what do you make of some of the comments that other callers have made, which is that actually it suits Starmer not to get this under control? I'm not sure that is true, actually. I think in terms of electoral priority, I can sense the anger around the country. I travel a great deal around the country, as you know. It is the one thing that everyone talks to me about, which is the scale of immigration, both legal and illegal immigration, an unrecognisable country. People feel that they're foreigners in their own country.
This is it. That is why I'm saying he needs to go on behalf of the UK people and say we're being underdone by no houses, no doctor's appointments, no NHS appointments, poor infrastructure. You know, we can't invest in buses. We can't invest. Well, you know what the public transport in Suffolk. You know what that's
Well, it's non-existent, isn't it?
Exactly. We can't do all that. So this is making my country suffer.
So let me just give you some facts, if I may. 1.2 million immigrants are on benefits in the UK. They receive 7.5 billion in universal credit. On top of that, providing them with public services came to 3.5 billion. We spend 27 million on interpreters for benefit claimants who can't speak English. 10% of referral letters sent out by the NHS had to be translated into a foreign language, and the police are spending 19 million quid a year on translation. It's ridiculous.
Totally ridiculous. And who is suffering? It's not those illegal immigrants, it's us.
Sharon,
it's us who are suffering.
I hear what you're saying. Sharon, really good to talk to you. Enjoy sunny Suffolk. I hope the washing dries as well very nicely in this sun. Keep all of those messages coming in, please. So I'm asking this afternoon, is Keir Starmer actually smashing the gangs, or is Nigel Farage right? Is he actually smashing records by allowing more people into this country illegally than ever before? Keep all of your thoughts and messages coming in. After the break, we're going to be talking about Donald Trump. Donald Trump lashing out at President Putin, saying, look, I want a deal on Ukraine. If you don't get that deal, then I'm going to impose tariffs. Also, he is imposing tariffs on countries around the world and trying to make America great again. And Starmer says he is ready to use sharp teeth if Trump hits the United Kingdom with tariffs. Does he actually mean it? This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. Let's change tack now and talk about Donald Trump. He says he is very angry and, I don't know if I can say this actually, peed off, I think I shall say, with Russian President Vladimir Putin after weeks of attempting to negotiate a ceasefire in Ukraine. He gave an interview to NBC in the United States. He said he was angry with Putin for attacking Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's credibility, and he threatened to impose a 50% tariff on countries buying Russian oil if Putin does not agree to a ceasefire. He also says he's going to put secondary tariffs on all oil coming out of Russia. That is quite something. So a secondary tariff could constitute up to 50% of goods entering the US from countries still buying oil from Russia. Let's actually listen to what President Trump said. This is Donald Trump lashing out at President Putin after stalling that ceasefire agreement. Just before we get that clip, let me just tell you exactly what he said. He said there will be a 25% tariff on oil and other products sold in the United States and these secondary tariffs. Now, that is enormous. So any country buying oil from Russia could be hit by a tariff as much as 50% on goods entering the US from countries still buying oil from Russia. Well, joining me now is Joseph Sternberg, who is Wall Street Journal editorial board. Good afternoon to you.
Hey, good afternoon.
I mean, this is quite something. I think Donald Trump is a businessman. He understands tariffs. He goes in high, and that is his opening negotiation stance. Just before I come to you, let's just take a look at what Donald Trump himself said.
Think he's going to go back on his word? You're talking about Putin. I don't think he's going to go back on his word. I've known him for a long time. We've always gotten along well. I think he'll be okay. But if he isn't, I was disappointed in a certain way. Some of the things that were said over the last day or two having to do with Zelensky, because when he considers Zelensky not credible, he's supposed to be making a deal with him, whether you like him or you don't like him. So I wasn't happy with that. But I think he's going to be good. And I certainly wouldn't want to put secondary tariffs on Russia, but if they were put on, it would not be very good.
I find this absolutely fascinating, Joseph. Look, at the end of the day, Donald Trump is a businessman. He understands finance. He has a high opening gambit. He understands tariffs. He understands business. What are your thoughts when his threat to Putin is, right, we're gonna whack massive tariffs on you if you don't actually come to the table and agree a ceasefire deal?
Well, I think what we're seeing here is a certain collision with reality unfolding, because I think that what we had seen in these ceasefire negotiations and sort of the whole Trump approach to the Ukraine war up to now had been that I think that he was pretty heavily influenced by a bunch of advisors in his circle who had fallen into the habit of blaming Ukraine for the war and for having provoked Putin, and thought that the solution to this was going to run through forcing Kyiv to make concessions. And the trouble with that is that it was so ahistorical. I mean, this was a war that started because Vladimir Putin chose to invade a neighboring country. And so I think that what we are seeing now is that the administration has discovered in a hurry, as they have sat down to start negotiating a settlement, is that the problem all along has been Vladimir Putin and his resistance to the idea of stopping the war that he started. And so I think that all of a sudden, when you can't end it by leaning on the party that didn't start it, now in a hurry we have all of the saber rattling directed at Russia, which is probably where it should have been directed all along.
I mean, it's extraordinary. Do you think the scales have fallen from Trump's eyes, that actually, I think you're right, that he was being advised by a sort of inner sanctum of people. He saw Putin as someone rather like himself, a tough businessman. He thought he could sort of talk turkey with Putin. And then, as you say, everything fell on Ukraine. It was Ukraine's fault. But it seems that he avoided the elephant in the room, which was that Putin invaded a sovereign country.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that there may be an element of scales falling from his eyes here. I mean, the interesting thing about Trump, and I think this tended to be true the first time around, it's, you can see a lot of evidence in a lot of areas now, is that he kind of starts out with a certain assumption or a predisposition to see the world in a certain way, which I think that we all do. I mean, what's kind of interesting about him is that he is then so flexible about ditching that as soon as he runs into a barrier of some sort. And so it may be that we are witnessing part of that process unfolding here. But the trouble is that he is also so inconsistent that it's difficult to know what to make of some of the threats, and that actually hurts his leverage with Putin now, because I imagine people sitting in the Kremlin thinking, well, maybe he doesn't really mean it and we can get away with a little bit more.
But is that his strength, his unpredictability?
I think that there is definitely an element of the crazy strongman that, can potentially be useful in some scenarios, but it comes with enormous costs. One that we're very aware of in Europe right now is that means that inconstancy and inconsistency means that allies can't trust you, even at the same time that you are trying to encourage adversaries to fear you. And he has never really figured out how to strike the right balance between the two.
And of course, his whole sort of mantra, "Make America Great Again," as I said, he's a businessman. He is imposing tariffs. On Liberation Day, I think that's what he's calling it. Liberation Day, which is taking place on Wednesday, basically whacking tariffs on anything that's imported into the United States. Now, Keir Starmer and Donald Trump have discussed the apparently productive negotiations. It depends who you read as to whether they are really productive. Talking about a US-UK prosperity deal. And, of course, what the United Kingdom is desperately hoping, and Keir Starmer is desperately hoping, is the UK will be sort of exempt from any tariff that is going to be imposed on the European Union.
Yes, and I mean, that might happen. Certainly Starmer and Trump seemed to develop a decent rapport when they met in person in the White House some weeks ago. And I think that it's also true that Trump seems to have a personal affection for the United Kingdom and sort of an understanding of the special relationship between the U.S. and the U.K. But again, sort of that inconsistency is an issue. I mean, one thing that may end up helping here is domestic political pressure, because Trump is also bumping up against the reality that some of his policies might not be that popular. Americans don't want to be dragged into foreign wars that go on forever and ever. But there's some evidence that people were not liking the idea that the U.S. was just going to sell out Ukraine as part of the negotiation. People want to feel like the U.S. is getting a quote-unquote good deal on trade, but they don't like the idea of prices going up as a result of the tariffs. So Trump has some very narrow tightropes that he's trying to walk at the moment domestically.
And, of course, Trump announcing 25% tariff on all imported cars. That will have a profound effect here because, of course, British manufacturers like JLR, so Jaguar Land Rover, Bentley, Aston Martin, Rolls-Royce, stand to be affected by those tariffs. They're luxury goods, though, the sort of people buying those. Do you think that actually sales will suffer if those tariffs are imposed?
Well, I think that, as concerns particular auto manufacturers, as you were suggesting, it's going to depend on the kind of car that they sell and the segment of the market that they're trying to sell it to. I think that the big danger, and it's actually a political danger for Trump, is that the biggest effects of these tariffs are going to be felt in the middle portion of the market, where you have middle-class consumers who are maybe a little more price sensitive, and where there is just no way around the tariffs because the U.S. doesn't manufacture enough cars. There's a reason America was importing so many autos to begin with at the price points that we were importing them at. And I think that Trump is really not reckoned with the political consequences of trying to upset that particular apple cart.
And just in terms of the dynamics here with the United Kingdom, of course, the UK is now thinking about dropping the digital services tax, which we know that Trump was vehemently opposed to. Clearly, urgency is key here if he's going to slap tariffs across the board on countries generally. There has been talk about the fact the UK won't retaliate immediately, but clearly this could spark a global trade war. I looked at the markets earlier. The stocks across the world have dropped. The FTSE 100 dropped by as much as 1.2% in London. So there are real ramifications to what Trump is doing.
Yes, and if you look at what some of his advisors back in the U.S. have been arguing for a while, that's the point. They want not just sort of leverage on specific trade disputes. They want a complete reordering of the global trading order, which is going to permanently reduce the U.S. trade deficit and all of the rest of it. And I think there's a pie in the sky element to a lot of that, but that is how they are thinking. I think that it's probably wise for foreign countries like the UK to not fall into that trap. Some of the policy ideas like ditching the digital tax is probably objectively good for the UK economy, whatever it means for the relationship with the US. But any kind of tariff retaliation, I think, probably is just cutting off Europe's nose to spite its face.
Really good to talk to you. Thanks ever so much for your time. That's Joseph Sternberg, who is Wall Street Journal on the Wall Street Journal editorial board. Once more, it's now time to find out how you could be in with a chance of winning Oasis tickets at Wembley this very summer.
How'd you fancy winning tickets to the hottest gig of the century? Here at Talk, we're giving you the chance to bag yourself a pair of tickets to Oasis at Wembley this summer. Plus, we're giving away a whopping 10 grand and putting you up for the weekend in a London hotel. All you need to do is text the word prize to 83338 and you're in the draw. Alternatively, you can enter by post. Once again, all you need to do is text the word prize to 83338 or you can enter by post. Good luck.
18 plus UK excluding Northern Ireland. Enter by text for £2 plus one standard network charge by 11 p.m. on the 7th of April 2025. Or post your name and number to Oasis Competition, PO Box 3190. Colchester CO2 8GP to arrive by 5 p.m. on the 10th of April 2025. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com.
This is a News Broadcasting Network promotion.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, yes, final part. 10 to 4 already on Monday, March the 31st. Let's take a call. Dave is in Basildon in sunny Essex. Good afternoon.
Hello there, Dr.
Hi.
David.
Hello
It's a
there.
tricky show, but I think that by now you should know better than to listen to what comes out of Charlie Rowley's mouth. He was an advisor to Michael Gove.
He was.
And all of this legislation that the Labour Party are now enacting was all brought in by the last Conservative administration.
So which legislation are you talking about?
All this two-tier justice
Yeah.
system. It's all previously Tory principles, and it's just the Labour Party who are actually enacting it. And all this rubbish about stopping the boats, they had the chance. They could have just turned them round and took the people back. Then they'd stop coming, and the French would be over the moon. The French don't want them.
No.
We're stupid enough to take them, so they're going to let them keep coming here.
So what do you... So if you were in charge, and I take your point about Charlie and the Conservative government and, of course, the two-tier sentencing as well, but just in terms of illegal migration, it seems to me that Keir Starmer keeps saying, well, we've done really well, we've deported, what I think he said 24,000 or thereabouts, but you have to look at the numbers. It's got much worse since he came to power, much worse, actually, because, of course, he scrapped Rwanda on day one. There is no plan, as far as I can see. They have no idea what to do. They're talking now about offshore processing. They're even now talking about disapplying the rulings from the ECHR. Have we not been here before?
Well, they don't need to take any notice. No one else takes any notice of the ECHR. And Donald Trump said, I'm going to get rid of them when I take over. And on day one, he was evicting illegal migrants out of the US. And we could do exactly the same, take all the ones that's coming illegally back to France, dump them there, they'd soon clear because they get nothing in France, and tell anyone that comes here that you will never get into Britain if you come illegally. Stop the legal migration, bring back the nurses' bursaries so that the girls want to train here,
and
train
boys.
our own doctors. We've got 7 or 8 million people unemployed. We do not need any immigration whatsoever. It's just lack of will. It's a hatred of Britain by all of our uni-party politicians. They must hate this country, despise it, and wish to bring it down completely. Well, I'd bring back the rope from about 90% of them and willingly put it round their necks.
Can I just ask you about something else we talked about this afternoon, which is about the attack on... this is Lord Sewell talking about the attack on white working-class boys, that really they are an underclass. They've been constantly ignored. You've got this metropolitan elite who I just don't think understand what's going on in this country. I've seen this enormous anger building around the country, people saying they don't recognise the country anymore, no one listens to them, the government just doesn't care what they think.
They're not... I don't believe it's that. I believe it's a deliberate attempt to destroy the country, to break it down completely so that there are no barriers, no boundaries, and we are the opposition, the white working class. I'm a 73-year-old bricklayer. I still do a little bit, not very much, but yeah, working class. And they just hate us. They hate the country. They would, if they could, and if you go back to even in the 90s, there was very little regard for Remembrance Sunday.
Yeah.
It's only because we've had several wars where a lot of men have been blown to bits. There haven't been many of them killed, but a lot of them have lost limbs, and the public have taken it on board, but the politicians would do away with it. Labour and Tory and Liberals, they would all do away with anything like that. They'll pay lip service to it, but they don't mean it, not at all. They detest us, despise us, and they fear us. The one thing they are frightened of is the 1917 revolution in Russia. That is the one thing that terrifies them, and they're absolutely going to make sure that the white working classes don't rise up. But when the imported ones do, when all the migrants rise up, the politicians will be the first ones to be beheaded, and they won't mess about with them. They will just throw them off buildings, behead them. I was listening to Peter Barnes on Kevin O'Sullivan's show the other night, saying the same nonsense as Charlie Rowley. They all say it, and as soon as there's a change of government, oh, don't worry, we'll be back in 10 years. You carry on with the same load of nonsense. So unless Reform get their act together, and their numbers are pretty much stagnant at the moment.
Hello, darling.
Hello, sorry, that's Jeremy Carl. Just finish your point, sir.
Yeah, unless Reform get their act together.
Well, I'm not here to speak in a Reform capacity, but I take the point that immigration is right up there in terms of electoral priority. Jeremy Carl, good afternoon.
You're looking very dapper. Can I just say, how amazing to see you.
How amazing to see you too.
Are you
I
well?
haven't seen you for ages, actually. I'm very well, thank you very much.
We're not allowed to talk about Reform, are we? But I must say you look remarkable. With your little microphone on, doing your business.
You watched, did you?
Oh, I did. I thought, Kyle, my show not suitable for today.
Well, no, so me and 10,000 of my closest friends.
Were they?
yes, right. Yes, that's yeah.
Is everything all right? Why are you here? Is that Ian? I'm only to see my wife, isn't he, Collins? He's a bit
Ian's
of a
off.
dirty man.
Yeah, I don't know where he is.
Do you care?
Of course I care.
You've lost weight. You look felt like. You look really good.
Do I? Thank you very much.
Lost weight,
I need to go to the gym, actually.
No, you don't. You've lost
I really
weight.
do. That's very sweet.
Yes.
Thank you very much. What do you want?
Nothing.
Oh, right. Okay.
What
What's
I usually
coming
say
up?
Well, I've no idea.
Oh, right.
Because
okay.
I don't do it like that.
Oh, don't you? What do you do?
Well, I just...
you
it's
just
about
wander
people,
in.
isn't it? I mean, the Harry and Meghan thing, I just wish I'd been here.
Do
I
you?
literally... I'm so sorry, everybody knows what I think. A man who allowed certain parts of his body to dominate his brain. Let's be perfectly honest. And isn't it ironic that all that BS against our royal family about racism and misogyny and bullying, oh, there we go.
Yeah,
right back at you, Ginger Whinger. And her, I can't have her in a million years. The ethnic minority two-tier justice thing, I think, is appalling.
It is.
Starmer, immigration makes me mad.
Yes.
It's the weather.
But what are you going to do about it? That's the point, isn't it?
I haven't heard anything.
Exactly. Exactly. Yvette Cooper says, oh, no, it's the weather, it's nothing to do with us. And by the way, the French have just changed the rules, so actually they are going to start doing
it's really
something in the
simple.
channel.
We give the French £500 million. They do absolutely zilch, and you will never convince me I'm into the point where people are bored of this, right? Let's be honest, right? Do you want to be on a tent on a French beach, or do you want to be in a 4-star hotel? I will forever sit here and say, if I'm an old age pensioner and I want to see a doctor, it will get me completely that some person who doesn't has never paid into this country, and we're not being political, but it's true.
No,
we give out everything to people who shouldn't get it. Somebody needs to come up with a plan. We don't know who that is.
No, we don't know who that is, but
he says with a slight